Chapter 2789. It would take some time for the people she sent to Seekong Planet to inquire about the matter. After all, the Divine Province was quite far from Seekong Planet, so it wasn't that convenient to travel back and forth. Moreover, it wasn't like she hadn't sent people there before, but several waves of people never returned. Shi Yongqian still didn't know that Seekong Planet's Mo Kingdom capital was protected by a shielding talisman matrix. If one wanted to use a talisman matrix to cross between two boundaries, it would only cause the person using the talisman matrix to unwittingly fall into spacetime reversal. The several waves of people she sent there also died silently and inexplicably like this. In view of Heavenly Law's existence, she couldn't possibly send many people to Seekong Planet frequently. The personal bodyguard she sent this time, Miao Xing, didn't use a talisman matrix and walked through a very concealed and special passage. Since there was no news back after so long, he should have succeeded. Unfortunately, that concealed passage could only allow one person to pass through at a time. Otherwise, she could bring several more people down with her. Miao Xing's level 12 cultivation as a great spiritual cultivator would probably be partially suppressed after going down. Shi Yongqian's eyes flashed, and a trace of ruthlessness flitted through them. She hoped that Miao Xing would be able to find something substantial this time and not disappoint her. Shi Yongqian lowered her head and glanced at the small characters jumping about on the jade communication talisman. The word "kill" was faintly discernible at the bottom. Her heart jolted, and she tightly gripped the jade talisman in her hand. She looked up at the little stoic standing at the side of the plaza, and an uncontrollable storm surged in her eyes like a dark night. As if sensing something, Arbor inadvertently looked up in the direction where Shi Yongqian disappeared. She only saw a familiar figure, and a faint sneer flitted through her eyes. "Follow me, children." Headmaster Yun led everyone to the Royal Academy. The entire inner city of Wind Thunder City belonged to the Royal Academy. The outer city's area was only half the size of the inner city, and many common people who moved here to do small businesses lived there. Apart from the students, there were only the instructors and their family members in the inner city. There were currently more than 13,000 students in the entire Royal Academy. Including the instructors and their family members, there were more than 20,000 people. If the Royal Academy's 8,000 guards were included, the population would be close to 30,000 people. The Royal Academy accepted all kinds of talents from the 3 prefectures, and accepted all kinds of students from all over the world. In the entire inner city of the Royal Academy, other than the study area, there was also a rich and colorful living area, which took up about half of the entire inner city. There were many streets and shops in the residential area. If the students didn't want to go too far, they could buy some things in the inner city's residential area. However, it was common knowledge that the price of goods in the inner city was 2 to 3 times higher than similar goods in the outer city. If one wanted to save money, it would be cheaper to buy some daily necessities from the outer city. Arbor's group followed behind Dean Yun and looked around the academy curiously. Although it was called an academy, it was actually a medium-sized city. The academy basically had everything. It's roughly divided into these 2 areas, the learning area and the living area. Once you've settled down, you can slowly familiarize yourself with the environment, Yun Piaomiao said with a smile. The academy's mission area is to the north of the living quarters. If you want to get rich resources, you can wait until you're familiar with the place before going to the mission area center to accept missions. Chapter 2790. The points obtained from the mission can be used to exchange for some items in the resource area. Dean Yun gave them a rough explanation. You can go and understand the details later. Arbor's group nodded and followed Dean Yun to the inner city's residential area. The students' lodging was to the south of the west. Of course, there were good and bad accommodations. The worst accommodations would cost 100 spirit coins per month, and 6 people could share a room with each other. Because it was cheaper, this type of room was basically snatched up by those who arrived first. For example, Arbor's group, who arrived so late, it was naturally impossible for them to snatch the cheap stuff. A small room for 4 people cost 300 spirit coins per month. A slightly better private room for 2 would cost 1,000 spirit coins a month for the accommodation. There were fewer people who stayed in this type of room, and only the noble ladies and young masters of aristocratic families were willing to spend this money. A single room for 1 person cost 3,000 spirit coins per month. If it was a small courtyard with a garden, it would cost 10,000 spirit coins. The best lodging was the garden house, which had servants and odd job workers. There were 2 gardens, one big and one small, and there were even guards at the door. This kind of garden house could accommodate about 15 to 20 people, and the monthly lodging cost was as high as 20,000 spirit coins. Currently, it seemed that only 2 rooms had been sold, and it was unknown which 2 spendthrifts paid for them. Why don't you just rob? When Little Fatty and Chi Xian heard the sky-high lodging price, their eyes widened as they angrily roared at Dean Yun. Dean Yun laughed and actually didn't feel awkward at all. He raised his hand and rubbed his nose. One was willing to take the hit, and the other was willing to take the hit. Arbor also felt that it was unbearably expensive, and his little face tightened into a ball. After a long while, he said, "This is even more expensive than the housing in our divine prefecture's imperial capital." It was simply ridiculously expensive, all right. She remembered that Mu Jingfeng rented out a house in the southern part of the city, and the yearly rent was only 30,000 spirit coins. But here, it was 20,000 spirit coins per month. Although the house Mu Jingfeng rented out might not be as big as this, it wasn't too far off. Yun Piaomiao, this profiteer, was going to be expensive beyond the star domain. Dean Yun smiled calmly and said, "You can go and accept missions. If you can complete a level 6 mission in a month, not only will you obtain a lot of mission points, but you will also receive a lot of mission points. The cost of the most luxurious accommodation can be reduced by half. If you can take over the garden area, you'll be able to live in the best place. It's definitely the best area in the entire academy. There aren't many of these types of special estates left." Dean Yun continued to encourage, "There are only 4 such special-grade courtyards in the entire academy. They are both large and exquisite. Can you go up to the sky?" Arbor pointed at the distant mountains floating in the sky. Yun Piaomiao looked back and rubbed his nose. "That's the Cloud Mist Peak where this principal lives. In the entire Wind Thunder City, there are only a few mountains that can reach the sky." Arbor curled his lips. "That's because of the rune array." Hearing this, Yun Piaomiao's eyes couldn't help but light up. "Little Miss actually knows. I also know that it's definitely a flying jade talisman array made up of 24 flying talismans." Arbor paused for a moment before continuing, "Furthermore, there are more than 100 sets of talisman arrays used. This was enough to allow these mountains to ascend." Yun Piaomiao's eyes were practically shining. Indeed. After so many years, this little miss was the only one who had seen through the mystery. Chapter 2791. When other people saw it, they would at most marvel at the mountain peak floating in the sky and wouldn't be able to explain it. As Yun Piaomiao exclaimed in admiration, he sized up the little girl and couldn't resist laughing. "Little doll, you have good eyesight. Is there a reward?" Arbor asked expressionlessly, "For example, half the rent or something?" Mo Lien and the others almost laughed out loud. Don't look at the little fellow's straight face, she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Yun Piaomiao actually laughed out loud and shook his head. "That's not possible." The little girl's face was wooden. "Do I have to pay additional rent? How many servants are there? Do I have to feed them?" "Everyone, ha 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 ha." Yun Piaomiao roared with laughter. The little girl looked at him as if he was a lunatic. What was so funny? Shouldn't they ask clearly? If they raised a bunch of idle people and had to feed them, wouldn't they suffer a huge loss? The one-time rent is $20,000 a month. It includes daily meals for cleaning, garden trimming servants, kitchen maids, and so on. Of course, if you aren't satisfied with the vegetables and fruits provided by the academy and want additional meals, you have to buy them yourselves. Seeing the little girl's frown, Yun Piao added, "Don't worry, the food provided to the special class housing estate is fresh vegetables, meat, and fruits every day. It's still very good. It's enough for 10 people. Oh, it includes meals." This was slightly better. Little Fatty, Chi Xian, and the others felt a little better after hearing this. All right. Xiao Mu nodded her small head vigorously. It was good to have a large housing estate. Everyone could settle down, and it would save them the trouble of having 2 people living in the east and 2 people living in the west. It would be uncomfortable and troublesome. If they wanted to discuss something with them, they would have to notify the entire residential area. With her nod, Prince Mo, Duan Yu, Duan Mu Qing, and Lu Yu started fighting to pay. Yun Piao couldn't help but twitch his mouth. A bunch of freaking nouveau riches. They were obviously very rich, but they were still freaking pretending and wanted to bargain with him. They really were a bunch of shameless brats. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have provided meals. In the end, Prince Mo was the first to pay the bill. Only when he said that they would pay next month did the crowd calm down. The super-rich Xiao Mu silently glanced at them and put away the money bag that she was about to take out. Last time, Grandpa Mu sent her a storage talisman and gave her another 5 million spirit coins. In addition to the 150 million that Mu Jingfeng had previously given him. And then there was the cash compensation from the various families. The super-rich darling Xiao now had close to 200 million spirit coins in cash. Even if the annual rent was 240,000 yuan, Miss Xiao could live there for a few hundred years. Alright, let's do that then. Miss Xiao suddenly had a feeling that she shouldn't have wasted her breath with Yun Piao just now. She shouldn't have wasted her breath and haggled with him for half a day just for a few coins. So tired. Why haven't you brought us there yet? Sir Jojo glanced at Cloud Mist. Dean Yun couldn't help but be amused and angry at the same time. Follow me. Donglin Court. It was one of the 4 special class housing complexes in the student residential area. In less than 15 minutes, the news spread throughout the entire academy that another nouveau riche had moved into Donglin Court, which had a monthly rent of 20,000 yuan. Everyone was already very shocked that nouveau riches had moved into Chioha Court and Xia Chi Court for 2 consecutive days. Chapter 2792. They didn't expect that even Winter Forest Court would be rented out today. It seemed like there were quite a few nouveau riche among this year's new students. The study area would probably be bustling tomorrow. Some people couldn't help but laugh when they thought of this. After all, the older students had been in the academy for so long, so it was relatively easy for them to deal with a few new students. When they thought of how those nouveau riche new students might be defeated, some of the more sinister fellows couldn't help but snicker inwardly. Oh, right. Before Principal Yun left, he said, being able to pass the Heaven Rank testing tablet means that student Xiao is undoubtedly the #1 student among the new students. Tomorrow is the first day of school for new students, so a general assembly will be held at 7 a.m. At that time, a new student representative will be invited to come up and say a few words. Student Xiao, be prepared. Arbor was baffled as he glared at Yun Piao's departing figure. Who did he ask to speak? Ha 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 ha. The little fatty suddenly burst into laughter, laughing so hard that tears were about to fall. It was too hilarious. What was wrong with Principal Yun's head? He actually asked the stoic face to speak on stage. The stoic face was someone who normally wouldn't speak if she could and wouldn't explain if she could. He even asked her to speak on stage. Ha 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 ha. Mo Lien also couldn't resist laughing when she looked down at the dumbfounded little fellow. Duan Yu twitched his mouth and said, "It's fine. Principal Yun probably meant that you can go on stage and say a few words." Emichim. Qi Xian glared fiercely at the little fatty. "You're not allowed to laugh at our Jojo. Jojo, it's fine. You can go on stage tomorrow. If you don't want to speak, just kill them with your gaze." Ha 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 ha. Lu Yu and the others clutched their stomachs in laughter. Arbor speechlessly glanced at Miss Xian and discovered that her expression was quite serious. "Let's go and assign the rooms." There were more than a dozen rooms in the entire Winter Forest Court, enough for everyone to stay in one room each. Everyone went back to rest after choosing their rooms. They were truly unbearably tired from rushing through the great north-facing forest for a day and night. After Qiao Mu finished bathing, she crawled into bed and saw Crown Prince Mo walking in from outside with his wet hair disheveled. She was truly a beautiful demon. Miss Qiao's eyes lit up, and she rolled onto the bed. Prince came forward, took off his clothes and snuggled under the covers. "Jojo, have you thought about what you want to say tomorrow?" "No." Miss Qiao stroked his hair. In that split second, Crown Prince Mo had already used the fire spirit to dry his hair. The Crown Prince reached out and pulled her into his arms. He asked with a smile, "Then what are you going to say to everyone on stage?" The little girl blinked and said seriously, "I'm just saying a few words." The Crown Prince thought that since his wife had already considered it, then there was naturally no problem. He changed the topic and lay down with her in his arms. "Rest early. Do we belong to the Divine Prefecture branch?" Arbor asked curiously. Along the way, they saw colorful flags with the words Shenzhou branch fluttering on the roofs and roadsides. It was hard to miss them. "Yes. There's also the Zhangzhou branch and the Ming province branch." At this point, Prince Mo pursed his lips. Logically speaking, Duan Yu should be staying with the people from the Zhangzhou branch. Arbor patted Mo Lian's head like he was pacifying a small animal. Prince Mo didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this action. Chapter 2793. The competition between the three academies has been going on for a long time. For resources, for benefits, and for the glory of each of the three prefectures. Mo Lien hugged the little fellow and spoke intermittently about several matters. After a while, he looked down and saw that the little fellow's breathing was even and she had already fallen asleep. He couldn't help but laugh and lowered his head to give her a light peck on her little mouth. Then, he laid her down flat and adjusted her sleeping position to a more comfortable one. He propped up his chin with one hand and gently stroked a few strands of hair by her cheek with his fingers. He stared at her intently for a long time. Early the next morning, everyone was woken up by the kitchen maid's hoarse voice. It was unknown where this kitchen maid came from, but when she saw that no one had come out of their rooms, she picked up a broken basin and started banging on it. As she knocked, she shouted, "Students, wake up. You're waking up a little too early. There's still 2 hours to 7 in the morning." Seeing everyone open the door and glare at her, the kitchen maid said with a serious expression, "Students, you still have to wash up and eat breakfast. It will take at least an hour to get from Winter Forest Court to the Academy District. It's forbidden to ride any kind of beast in the Academy. You can only rely on yourself to run, or use your spiritual energy to cast a flying spell to rush over." So that's how it was. Only then did everyone silently retract their glares and start washing up in resignation. Breakfast was quite sumptuous. While the group of 10 were eating, Mu Xingchen's voice came from outside. "Younger sister. Mu Xingchen was a senior student of the Imperial Academy. He naturally had his own room in the past. However, seeing that he was carrying a bag in his left hand and a lunchbox in his right, it seemed like he wanted to move, and Arbor looked up at him and expressionlessly ate the porridge in her hand. Mu Xingchen was already used to her stoic little cold face. He walked up and placed the lunchbox in front of everyone. Younger sister, ginseng chicken soup, drink it while it's hot. Prince Mo glanced at his brother-in-law vigilantly. His brother-in-law even knew how to make soup. He was starting to feel threatened. I'll take you to the learning area in a while. You're not familiar with this place. There's a small path from Donglin Garden, so it'll save you a lot of time. I'm Jojo's big brother, Mu Xingchen. You must be Jojo's friends. Let's get to know each other. When Qi Xianxian and the rest heard him speak so familiarly, they hurriedly stood up and greeted him. Big brother Mu, what are you carrying? My bedding. Mu Xingchen turned to Arbor and said, Sister, your place is spacious. I'll check out of my room. Let's stay together in the future. Everyone was speechless. The petty person in Mo Lian's heart kept thumping his chest and stamping his feet. If he had known earlier, he would have gotten a double room with Sir Chow Chow back then. Look at this big family. In the future, if he wanted to steal a kiss from his little wife, he would have to avoid his teammates and brother-in-law. So Bitter Arbor drank a small bowl of ginseng chicken soup made by Mu Xingchen. More than half of the soup went into the little fatty's stomach. After that, everyone praised their big brother's culinary skills. Everyone was beaming as they followed Mu Xingchen out of Donglin Garden and headed to the learning area. Along the way, Mu Xingchen introduced the buildings and sceneries to them. He brought them to the largest practice field in the learning area. At this time, many students were already there. The new students were gathered in a circle. The older students were also mixed together. They lowered their heads and whispered to each other. Chapter 2794. Arbor's group attracted quite a bit of attention when they went over. After all, everyone in this group had outstanding looks. Plus, many people had seen the little girl at the plaza on Main Academy Street before, so they were especially curious now. Their scrutinizing gazes continuously swept over the little girl, as if wanting to see through this child. What kind of energy was stored in such a tiny person's body to be able to shatter the heaven-rank testing steel in one go? Everyone whispered to each other, pointing and whispering to each other. Arbor turned a deaf ear to these words and followed Mu Xingchen through the crowd with Mo Lian, Duan Yu, and Qi Xianxian to arrive at the circle where the new students stood. Eldest young Sir Qin walked over with a grin and waved his paw at the little girl. Little fellow, we meet again. Arbor nodded reluctantly. She felt like the Qin estate's people were like lingering spirits that lingered everywhere she went. Eldest young Sir Qin winked and smiled at her. Little stoic, you can't be annoyed that I've appeared in front of you again, right? You're quite self-aware. Prince Mo held the little fellow's hand and walked to the side, throwing a look at eldest young Sir Qin for him to figure it out himself. The eldest young Sir wanted to chase after them and say a few words, but at this time, Headmaster Yun flew over from afar with several academy consecrators and a dozen or so valiant and formidable instructors. They stopped on a raised platform in front of the practice field. An instructor looked down at the 10,000 or so students below and said neither softly nor loudly, "New and old students, line up separately. This needs no further explanation, right?" Everyone started moving in unison. They each lined up in several hundred rows according to the three academies' factions. The old students had lined up who knew how many times. Every time the academy summoned students to the practice field for an important announcement, they would line up to give instructions. This had already become a routine. There were about 1,000 new students here, and they each lined up in 7 or 8 rows, crookedly lining up to the left of the old students. Headmaster, please speak. Dean Yun walked up with an enigmatic look on his face. He didn't look like the talkative person who was trying to promote the special class housing estate to Arbor and the others yesterday. He said a few simple words of encouragement to the new students. Then, he waved his hand and gracefully retreated, giving the place to one of the Academy's worshippers. This consecrator of the Academy's disciplinary courtyard was notoriously fussy and strict. He recited all of the Royal Academy's rules and regulations according to the book, to the point that Chow Mu was about to doze off. After reciting for half an hour, he finally finished reciting. After the Academy consecrator left, Principal Yun smiled and said to the crowd, "Now, let's invite the new representative, Student Chow, to come on stage and say a few words." Eldest young Sir Chin's mouth twitched as he turned to look in Arbor's direction with an odd expression. At the same time, Do Fenghua and Do Fengmian, Qin Axayan, Qin Xiu, Qin Zhou, and some of the patrician families of the Divine Province who somewhat understood the little stoic were also looking at her across the crowd. ACI, who was standing in Ming Province's line, also looked over curiously. Everyone was thinking at the same time, what did you want the little stoic to say on stage? Arbor expressionlessly stood on the high platform of the practice field and gazed icily at the students below. Everyone felt as if they were being stared at by a ferocious beast. "Students, study hard and don't provoke me. Otherwise, die." Everyone was flabbergasted. Chapter 2795. Principal Yun turned his head to look at the little fellow beside him in confusion. This he asked her to say a few sentences, and she really did say a few sentences. Study hard and don't provoke her. Otherwise, die. It was a few sentences. Now, Principal Yun had a deep understanding of the meaning behind Yun Chang's meaningful gaze. Crown Prince Mo exasperatedly exchanged glances with the little fatty and the others. What was going on? Why was everyone looking at him as if he was a weirdo? He definitely didn't teach his wife to say these words. Last night, he asked his wife what she was going to say on stage. His wife said that she was just going to say a few sentences. He naively thought that his wife should know what to say. However, it was true. When she went on stage today, she just said a few sentences. Two sentences. After Sir Jojo said 2 sentences, she realized that everyone was silent. Everyone was looking at her as if they were looking at a god. She couldn't help but frown, turned her head and blinked hard at Principal Yun. "Principal Yun, kid, do you think everyone is a worm in your stomach?" "What do you mean by blinking?" Sir Jojo blinked at Principal Yun again. One of the tutors at the side couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed lightly and said to Principal Yun, "Principal, this student should be asking you if she can leave." This year's new student representative was definitely a weirdo. The instructors thought to themselves as they carefully sized up the little fellow. They realized that this little girl was expressionless from the start to the end. Her emotions didn't fluctuate at all. It looked like she was really a cold-faced little doll. Principal Yun pursed his lips and laughed awkwardly. He reluctantly went up to save the situation and said, "Student Chow's meaning should be, for everyone to, study hard, work hard, and help each other. The entire royal school should be tied together like a rope. Don't fight, bitch, dog fight, just because we are from different factions. Appropriate competition is necessary, but we should also pay attention to the friendship between students, right?" The students below all heaved a sigh of relief. That should be the case. What the dean said was still somewhat reasonable. Previously, they must have misunderstood the little girl's meaning. The little girl shouldn't have threatened them on the first day of school. It was difficult for Headmaster Yun to say so much in one breath to smooth things over for the little stoic. He wanted to cry tears of sympathy for himself. Was it easy for him? No. Just as Principal Yun finished speaking his impassioned words to save the situation, the little stoic directly denied it. I just want to warn them to be careful and stop bothering me. She turned her head and glanced at Dean Yun. Once I make a move, there is no turning back. Everyone was speechless. Dean Yun's breath was stuck in his throat, and he almost choked from anger. This little girl was truly someone who could anger someone to death without paying for it. Could this be considered as him failing to save the situation by going all out to save the day? This little girl is quite arrogant. A rough voice suddenly emerged from the group of students. Everyone turned their heads to look and saw a guy draped in tiger skin, revealing his arms and legs. His appearance was especially bold and unrestrained. He strode out from the crowd and leaped onto the stage. Underworld Province's branches DAO. Ask for guidance on this new student's strength. I want to see what kind of strength can make you say such arrogant words. Chapter 2796. Ming Yasi's expression was displeased, and he turned to look at a robust youth beside him. Who is that? This young man, who was also a senior student of the Underworld Region branch, was called Turnbull. Although he did not understand what was going on when he saw that His Highness was unhappy, he still said respectfully, his name is Dao. He is an extremely talented clansman from the D family's branch. Ming Yasi glanced coldly at Dao on the platform and asked in a bad mood, who allowed him to go up. Running over to find trouble with a little girl to make his presence known. Ming Yasi thought that the little girl already disliked him to begin with. She wouldn't mistakenly think that he was the one who let that idiot go up to challenge her, right? Would the little fellow dislike him even more because of this? While Ming Yasi was endlessly criticizing, Turnbull's expression was a bit puzzled. Although he hadn't interacted with His Highness for more than 2 days, he believed he had a good grasp of his temperament. This was an extremely arrogant and difficult person to get along with. Yet today, he was actually asking him why Dao went up to challenge her. Shouldn't he challenge her? That little girl was slapping the faces of all the senior students of the 3 branches in the academy. A freshman little girl dared to be so arrogant. It would be strange if no one went up to challenge her. Tell him to come down. Ming Yasi said coldly. The more he thought about it, the more likely this was. He absolutely couldn't let the little girl misunderstand him. Ollie, who was standing beside him, couldn't resist sneaking a glance at his elder brother. He hastily cleared his throat and shouted, Dao. Come down. His voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for all the students to hear him clearly. Akira had previously been surrounded and complimented by a group of new students, so when the instructors asked her to line up, she was escorted to the front of the new students. At this time, she was still some distance away from Ollie and Yasi, who were mixed in the back of the crowd. Now that she heard Ollie say this, she couldn't help but secretly grit her teeth and look up at the little stoic on the platform. Without a doubt, Big Brother Yasi had instructed Ollie to shout this. What was so good about that stoic girl that she kept calling Big Brother Yasi on her mind all day? Dao, who had just stood in front of the little stoic and didn't have time to speak, was involuntarily taken aback when he heard Alex's words, and he turned to look at the crowd. Turnbull was afraid that Dao's honest nature would act up again, so he hurriedly called out, Dao, His Highness asked you to come down. With that said, how could Dao not understand? So it was His Highness Dark Yas who told him to go down. Although, he was a little cowardly. He had just jumped onto the high platform and rolled down with his tail between his legs. It was really a little embarrassing. However, His Highness Yas had even defeated the former Crown Prince, His Highness Underworld Wolf. What a joke. He was just a disciple of a small branch of the D family, so he naturally could not openly challenge His Highness ACI. Therefore, Dao, who had been on the stage for less than 2 seconds, jumped off the stage with his tail between his legs. The little stoic was already prepared for battle and was about to summon her feral. The other party suddenly said that he didn't want to fight, and then rolled down by himself. This was simply inexplicable. Crazy. The stoic man muttered to himself. The few instructors who were closer to her couldn't help but twitch their mouths when they heard this. Ha 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 ha. I didn't expect that someone from Great Ming Province would also cower. A mocking laugh came from outside the crowd. A figure flashed and scuttled onto the high platform with a whoosh. Chapter 2797. This person's outfit was even more unsightly than the tiger skin outfit from before. His hair was disheveled, his entire body stinked, and his fat belly was exposed. His feet were bare, and the soles of his feet were covered in a layer of 3 feet of dirt. Darling Chow hurriedly took a step back, and her eyes widened. Get lost. Stinky thing. It's unbearably stinky. All the teachers were speechless as their mouths twitched. That man immediately flew into a rage and shouted sternly, "This little girl is really arrogant and conceited. Today, let me teach you how to be a person." Arbor didn't wait for him to fly over, and his figure immediately flashed and hid behind Principal Yun. He angrily glared at the principal. What kind of Imperial Academy is this? You're picking up trash from the academy. Can just anyone enter this Imperial Academy? The students don't even have a uniform. One moment there was a tiger-skin man, and the next moment there was a stinky beggar wearing only a pair of underpants. It simply made people speechless. Of course we do. The principal said with an aggrieved face, it's just that here, we don't require everyone to buy the academy uniform. It's all for people to do what they can. Some people, after entering the academy for several years, still haven't saved enough money to buy a set of academy uniform. This time, it was Arbor's turn to be dumbstruck. How much is your academy uniform? This time, there was no need for Principal Yun Piaomiao to reply. The teacher from before spoke again with an indifferent expression, 100,000 spirit coins. Why don't you just rob? The entire academy's sky was filled with the little girl's angry roar. All the students instantly felt that the little girl's roar was simply what everyone was thinking. You can't say it like that. Our academy uniform isn't some simple clothing. It's a defensive spiritual clothing. It can effectively block 100 full-powered attacks from a spirit master below level 10. You definitely won't lose out to your little girl. Why don't you buy one? Let me tell you, if you want to enter the heaven ranking and earth ranking, you must wear this academy uniform. This is also for the fairness of the competition. Is your team made up of 9 people or 10 people? Give me a set of all of them. What was happening? Wasn't this the freshman entrance assembly? Why did their principal Yun suddenly start promoting? Everyone looked at Yun Piaomiao with a dumbfounded expression. The instructors could not bear to look at it. One of the consecrators coughed softly and went forward to tug at Dean Yun's sleeve. Only then did Dean Yun put away his promotional expression and chuckled. Oh, where were we just now? Brat, do you think you'll be fine just because you're hiding behind the dean? Today, let me teach you how to behave. A smelly bug dares to boast that it wants to teach me how to behave. The repeated provocations made Arbor fly into a rage. His voice was extremely cold as he said, "Kill him." There was an uproar among the crowd of students below. They all recognized the person who jumped onto the stage. He was from the barbarian tribe and did not belong to any of the 3 big schools. He was not weak and was also a senior student of the royal school. And now, the stoic-faced little girl actually said, "Kill him." Wasn't she a bit too arrogant? In the blink of an eye, as soon as the little girl finished speaking, a giant sand scorpion taller and stronger than a hill suddenly appeared behind the little fellow and quickly crawled over with rustling movements. A pair of large, sturdy pincers abruptly pierced toward that person. Chapter 2798. This sturdy sand scorpion waved its two large pincers and rapidly spun like a top. With a flick of its tail, it released its hidden stingers with a whoosh. This round of attack was fast, ferocious, and wild. It was simply ecstatic. Almost all the mentors were dumbfounded. With a loud boom, the entire stage collapsed from the sturdy sand scorpion's stomp. Everyone took advantage of the momentum and landed in front of the crowd. Principal Yun opened his mouth and raised his hand to say, "Have mercy." That sand scorpion swung its large black tail and sent that underpants man flying. It swiftly crawled forward and used its large pincers to clamp down on the underpants man. The other party didn't even have the slightest chance to retaliate before he was pressed to the ground. Its stinger was raised high, and a poisonous needle was about to pierce that underpants man's thigh. Principal Yun quickly flew over and used a wisp of sacred energy to land on the sand scorpion's pincers, causing it to retract its stinger in pain. The underpants man took advantage of the situation to roll out from under the scorpion. His face was ghastly pale as he shouted loudly. After cursing in a tribal dialect that no one understood, he hastily circulated a wisp of spiritual energy and struck the sand scorpion's weak abdomen. Hiss, hiss. The sand scorpion was hit and crawled back 2 steps in pain. The underpants man was abruptly struck down by a bolt of lightning. Sir Jojo was thoroughly enraged. He flew up into the air, and hundreds of thunder spirit talismans floated around him. Yun Piao Miao. You think you can save him by helping him? Even heavenly law can't stop the people I, Arbor, want to kill. Let alone you. His shout silenced the entire venue. After Yun Piao Miao and the mentors recovered from their shock, they wanted to stop him. However, at this time, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, Qi Xian, Little Fatty, Lu Yu, and the others also flew over and blocked the mentors. Since it's a spar between students, isn't it a bit unreasonable for the mentors to make a move? Mo Lien sneered. Whoever dares to help today will be making an enemy of our divine province. You want to bully me with numbers? If you want to fight, come find us. Little Fatty raised his arms and said indifferently. Yun Piao Miao was completely speechless. No, I'm not helping. Didn't you say that I'm helping you? Are you bullying Jojo because no one can help you? Qi Xian angrily interrupted Principal Yun's words. Her small face turned ruthless as she said, Are you all blind? Just who is provoking who? Who is rushing out to court death? Can't you see? That rigid reverend from the abstinence courtyard was so angry that he was about to explode. All of you are ignoring the academy's rules. You don't want to continue studying here, do you? Duan Yu snorted. With such an indiscriminate academy, it doesn't matter whether I study or not. Yun Piao Miao wanted to cry but had no tears. Just now, he really didn't want to help that underpants student. It was just that as the dean, he couldn't just watch a student fight to death. Who would have thought that such a simple move would incur the wrath of the masses? All right, everyone calm down, calm down. Dean Yun acted as if he was putting out a fire. He helped to extinguish the anger of Mo Lien and the others, and then hurriedly extinguished the anger of the Commandment Yard's consecrators. In the end, it was that underpants guy who courted death. If he didn't come up, then wouldn't everything be fine? While he was pondering, countless bolts of lightning had already descended layer by layer, explosively bursting into lightning flowers on the underpants guy's body. Chapter 2799. What kind of person could withstand several hundred spirit thunder talismans? The students below shuddered one after another. They uniformly looked at the little stoic girl as if they were looking at a monster, and they involuntarily took a few steps back. Especially Dao, who had courted disaster by jumping onto the stage but was called down by Yossi. He was practically shedding tears of gratitude as he looked at His Highness. His Highness deserved to be His Highness. After careful deliberation, he naturally came up with a plan. If His Highness hadn't told him to get down, the unlucky guy who was attacked by the sand scorpions and bombarded by hundreds of lightning bolts on the stage would be him, DAO. Thank you, His Highness, thank you, Underworld Province's God Punisher. The heavens still protected him, DAO. At this point, in the hearts of all the students at the Imperial Academy, the lofty image of the terrifying little stoic murderous star, nouveau riche little stoic, and the little stoic who opened a talisman shop at home, had been thoroughly established. Several of DAO's good friends stepped forward and patted his shoulders comfortingly, exchanging rueful glances with him. Fortunately, we have the wise and mighty His Highness, so we won't be like that big idiot from the barbarian tribe and provoke this murderous star. The Sun Moon Temple's Holy Son has graced us with his presence to pay a visit to the Imperial Academy's Dean Yun Piao Miao. Following the sound of an ethereal female voice, melodious stringed and woodwind music entered everyone's ears. In the distant sky, a dozen red-crowned cranes with long white feathers could be seen flying unhurriedly toward the academy amidst layers of clouds. Rose petals, which were surrounded by a fragrance, fell down layer by layer. Several dozen fairy-like flower children cleared the path, scattering petals all over the sky. Behind them followed a luxurious sedan carried by 16 brawny men. The sedan flew through the air and headed toward the students. Arbor's hand paused slightly, and a faint trace of disgust surfaced in his heart. This Sun Moon Temple style was truly quite disgusting. Whether it was that saintess from before or this holy sun, they were all extravagant as soon as they appeared. Every time they appeared, they would be swarmed by crowds of people, as if they were afraid others wouldn't know their noble identities. They were just going out, so why were they so particular? The moment Arbor's hand paused, the lightning in the sky also retracted slightly. The sedan of 16 people had already arrived above everyone's heads. At this moment, a surge of energy surged from the carriage toward Sir Jojo. This power was surging and abnormally fierce. If this attack hit, even if Jojo didn't die, he would definitely lose half his life. Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others all turned serious, and they swiftly shot towards Arbor's side. When Arbor sensed that something was wrong, he decisively covered himself with an eggshell defensive barrier. At this critical moment, a red figure suddenly appeared beside Lord Xiqiao. Reaching out, the figure grabbed Xiqiao and carried her away. With a flick of his sleeve, the surging power was suddenly blocked, and all of it was repelled with a thunderous force. Bang! A ferocious force landed on the carriage. How could the 16 burly men who were carrying the carriage resist? In an instant, they were scattered by this force and fell to the ground. At the same time, the carriage was completely shattered by the force. After a loud bang, a white figure scuttled out from between the muslin curtains. He coughed to suppress his astonishment. The other party's cultivation was actually a level higher than his. He was already a spiritual venerable, so could it be that the other party was actually an immortal venerable expert? At this moment, Mo Lien and Duan Yu had already arrived at Arbor's side. Chapter 2800. Taking a closer look, the little fellow's stoic face was expressionless, and her body was wrapped in a transparent eggshell. She was being held in Hu Jinshan's arms, and that appearance was simply a bit comical. Mo Lien secretly suppressed the amusement in her heart and reached out to take the eggshell. The little fellow's entire body was wrapped in that eggshell, so she was just a sphere. It was hard to grab anywhere, so she could only hold her. She looked down at her appearance and expressionlessly undid the defensive barrier on her body before hopping off the ground. Duan Yu dared to bet his head that if anyone dared to laugh out loud, Sir Jojo would definitely take out a washboard to beat them up. Being interrupted by the Holy Sun inexplicably saved the life of that brat from the barbarian tribe. That guy was already at his last gasp from being struck by lightning and was silently dragged away by someone. When Arbor looked back, the person had already run away, so he could only resentfully feed Sand Scorpion a pill and recall it back to Shaji planet. Other people only thought that the little girl recalled the spirit beast into her spirit beast space. Yun Piaomiao breathed a sigh of relief, but her expression darkened again. She coldly glared at the white-robed Holy Son of the Sun-Moon Temple who floated over. Holy Sun Mi Yen, you came from afar, so our academy should warmly welcome you. However, you suddenly attacked our academy's student. This is very unjustifiable. Holy Sun Mi Yen coldly swept a glance at Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others before his gaze finally landed on a grinning, tall man waving a small peach-pink fan. A sharp glint flashed through the depths of his eyes. This young man before him was actually a venerated immortal. How was this possible? In the entire Divine Province, the number of venerated immortals could be counted on one hand. When did such a young venerated immortal appear? Why didn't he know? Shouldn't a venerated immortal have ascended and left this place? Did something go wrong with the heavenly law's restrictions? Why wasn't this venerated immortal restrained by the heavenly law? If Hu Jinchen could hear this person's inner voice, she would definitely infuriate him to death and tell him without hesitation, this venerated immortal has already come out of the Tower of Punishment, so what more do you want? Worst comes to worst, I'll just capture my true self and force my way in again. It's a misunderstanding, Mayan said calmly, nodding apologetically at Dean Yun. Jojo tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve. Without another word, Prince Mo's eyes flashed fiercely, and a gust of wind from his fist, which was imbued with saint power, flew towards the Holy Sun's face. At the same time, Arbor also raised his hand and threw hundreds of ice spikes at the saint. The son of Saint was caught off guard and dodged twice in a very embarrassing manner. He was able to easily dodge Arbor's icicles, but he had to frown and take Mo Lien's punch seriously. He crossed his arms in front of him, thinking that the holy armor gauntlets on his arms would definitely be able to block his opponent's attack. He didn't expect that he would be knocked back a few steps by this fist wind. Only then did he take a deep breath to stabilize his body. His eyes were filled with unconcealable astonishment. Just as the son of Saint raised his head and was about to look at Mo Lien, he saw another gust of fierce saint power burrowing out from the side and pouncing at his face again. Damn it! One shouldn't hit someone's face in a fight, but these people actually wanted to hit his face one by one. The son of Saint gritted his teeth and withstood Duan Yu's attack. In the next second, he saw a crafty saint power materialize into 5 fingers. Paw! He slapped his face. The little stoic was relieved. Before the son of Saint flared up, she said coldly, "This is also a misunderstanding." Chapter 28:01. Holy Sun Mi Yen was extremely vexed, and a harsh glint flitted through his eyes. His gaze swept past Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and He Chen before finally landing on the cold-faced little stoic. His gaze was like a needle, filled with endless coldness and probing as it landed on the little fellow. Headmaster Yun frowned and stepped forward to block the students. His gaze met Holy Sun Mi Yan's indifferent gaze. May I know the reason for Holy Sun Mi Yan's sudden visit? This Holy Sun came today to convey a message to the Divine Province's Crown Prince. Holy Sun Mi Yen regained his usual calmness, as if the slap he had just received didn't exist. Recently, the temple's great divine priest inspected the rear mountain and found that the mystic realm might open. The mystic realm will probably open earlier this time. Holy Sun Mi Yan's gaze coldly landed on Prince Mo's face, staring at him to check his expression. However, he was soon disappointed. No emotion could be discerned from Prince Mo's face at all. This Holy Sun came to inform the two of you. I hope you can make some preparations in advance. Also convey the great divine priest's message. Mi Yen lowered his eyes slightly and nodded at Headmaster Yun. The temple intends to provide 30 quotas to the Royal Academy for the opening of the Sun-Moon Mystic Realm this time. I hope Headmaster Yun can cooperate with our temple to select talents. As long as you obtain a jade tablet, you can enter the Mystic Realm with the Holy Nun and the temple's people to explore and search for treasures. Everyone can bring out a treasure from the Mystic Realm. The excess will be turned over to the temple. Yun Piao couldn't help but be taken aback. The Sun-Moon Temple's Mystic Realm opened once every 10 years, and this wasn't the first time it opened. However, every time the Sun-Moon Mystic Realm opened in the past, the temple would send people to guard it strictly to prevent outsiders from sneaking in. Unexpectedly, they were so generous this time to open it to the Royal Academy. Oh, of course, this couldn't be considered generous. After entering the Mystic Realm, each Academy student could only take one item at most, and the excess would be turned over to the temple. However, it was already very good to be able to go in and have a look, gain experience, and obtain a handy treasure in passing. Benevolent smiles immediately appeared on the faces of the Academy's worshippers. They nodded and said, "Dean, this is a good thing." Dean Yun weighed the pros and cons and nodded. This is indeed good news. Thank you, Holy Sun. Holy Sun Mi Yen nodded lightly. During the selection period, this Holy Sun intends to personally see the strength of this batch of students. I'm afraid I will have to stay here for a while. Sorry to trouble Dean Yun. Dean Yun nodded and called for 2 people to arrange accommodations for the deity's Templars people. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Then, he turned to look at Mo Lien and said, I'll stay with the Divine Prefecture Crown Prince. The Crown Prince's residence should be big enough to accommodate the people from the Divine Hole. How shameless! Qi Xian, little fatty, and the others cursed in their hearts. Without waiting for the Crown Prince to speak, the little stoic nodded, 100,000 a day's rent, absolutely no bargaining. Everyone staggered and almost fell to the ground. Didn't you just say that the dean was evil? Little miss, you're the #1, incomparably evil person in the world. A priest behind Mi Yen had long been unable to restrain the anger in his heart. When he heard the little stoic's words, he instantly flared up. What did you say? Chapter 2802. 200,000 spirit coins per day. If you want to stay, then stay. If you don't want to, scram. Arbor threw down this sentence and pulled Mo Lien's hand, turning to leave. What? Just a second ago, you said there was no second price. But a second later, you freaking doubled the price. After taking a deep breath, Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly, pay up. That priest's jaw was about to fall off. Starting from 5 days. Pay up. Holy Sun Mi Yen forced these 2 words out from between his teeth. When he said the word pay, he gritted his teeth and chewed on the word like he was chewing wax. She guessed that the anger in his heart was surging like an avalanche. How pitiful. He was actually angered to this extent by the little stoic. The priest trembled as he fished out a spirit coin card and shakily handed it to the little stoic. Arbor calmly snatched it and directly threw it to the stoic-faced headmaster Yun. He said very heroically, prepare 10 brand new sets of school uniforms. If there's even a single thread on them, refund me the money. 100,000 spirit coins for a set of uniforms. If there was even the slightest flaw, she would make this Yun Piaomiao suffer the consequences. Headmaster Yun shuddered and suddenly really wanted to go home to hug and cry with his elder brother. Big bro, how is this finding me a student? You're completely stuffing me with an ancestor. Mo Lien curled her lips in amusement and was led away by the little girl. Gather here at 7 a.m. tomorrow. At that time, I'll assign you new students a subject, Headmaster Yun hastily muttered. Seeing the two of them leave without looking back, he couldn't help but sigh. It looked like the academy was really going to be lively in the future. Qi Xianxian squeezed to Arbor's side and glanced at the group of people from the Temple of the Gods following behind them. She lowered her voice and asked, Jojo, since you know these guys don't have good intentions, why the hell did you take them in? Are you afraid they'll cause trouble? The little stoic was still indignant. This holy son's cultivation was much higher than that holy nun from before. Just now, she had almost suffered a great loss in the hands of this person. If it weren't for He Chen's timely appearance and blocking for her, she might have been beaten to the point of vomiting blood. Can 1,000,000 spirit coins make up for it? Heh, stop joking. They will suffer in the future. Lady Qiao Qiao winked at Qi Xianxian with her watery eyes. The two young ladies held hands and walked to the front, whispering something to each other. After Qi Xianxian heard Jojo's words, she felt extremely comfortable and giggled. That night, Holy Sun Mi Yen looked at his empty wing room and was so furious that his hair was about to explode. He knew that this girl was petty, but he didn't expect her to be so stingy. She actually only gave him a room, and there was nothing inside. You want a bed? All right, I'll pay you 100,000 spirit coins. A stool. 50,000. A teacup. 20,000 for one. Holy Sun Mi Yen takes things out of his inner world one by one. He has never been so aggrieved before. Fortunately, he had plenty of daily necessities in his inner world, which was enough to last him a few nights. Holy Sun, why did we have to come with them and live here? The two guards who were helping the Holy Sun spread out a mattress in the corner and couldn't bear to see the Holy Sun so aggrieved couldn't help but grumble. Naturally, it's to observe those two people from a close distance. Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly, that Crown Prince isn't easy to deal with. Now, it seems that Little Witch is also difficult to deal with. Chapter 2803. No wonder the holy nun had suffered such a huge loss in their hands. Even he could not gain any advantage in the hands of these people, not to mention the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang. Thinking of that icy expressionless face, the holy nun Mi Yan's eyes could not help but turn cold. He still had to give this little girl a special gift at the division ceremony tomorrow. The night passed without a word. Arbor's group had a good night's sleep and woke up energetically at 5 in the morning. The voice of the school administrator came from outside. He brought in a few large boxes and placed them in the courtyard. 10 sets of school uniforms, please accept them. Mata walked forward and opened each box to take a look. There were 2 to 3 sets of school uniforms in each box. They were pure white and had a spherical multicolored flower embroidered on the collar and chest area. Arbor felt that this flower was extremely familiar. Taking a closer look, wasn't this the longevity flower? So, the royal school's flower was the longevity flower. Could it be that there was a longevity tree planted in the royal school? Arbor's thoughts turned slightly, but she was still somewhat uncertain. The longevity tree's growing environment was extremely harsh. It would not bloom unless it was in the Xian domain or bear fruit unless it was in the God domain. She had raised the longevity tree on Paradise Planet for so long, but it still could not bear fruit in the spirit domain. The main reason was that the environmental conditions were not up to standard. According to Little Tree, it would probably only bear fruit after Paradise Planet ascended to the God domain. And ascending to the God domain, Arbor could not help but sigh when she thought of this. It was still too early. Her cultivation was only a level 11 Great Spiritual Master. She was still very far from the true God domain cultivation. Take it slow, everything was not something that could be obtained by force. Qiao Mu had everyone carefully inspect their respective school uniforms. Zhang Ping flipped them over and over for a look, causing the steward who was delivering the school uniforms to the side to be at a loss for words. After everyone checked carefully, they put on their white school uniforms. This defensive spiritual clothing was indeed a priceless treasure that cost 100,000 spirit coins per set. As soon as they put it on, it automatically adjusted the width and length according to their respective figures. It was very fitting on their bodies, as if it was a second layer of skin that could breathe. It was extremely comfortable to wear. Jojo nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. The steward who delivered the uniform couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Before this, the principal had already instructed him to check the academy uniform that was sent over thoroughly. Not even a single thread could be found. These new students were really fussy. The steward wiped his sweat and let a few guards out. The people of Arbor were wearing white school uniforms. When they were sitting in the side hall and having dinner, they saw Holy Sun Mi Yen come over with a gloomy face with a dozen of his priests and guards. The little fatty almost choked on the porridge in his mouth. Everyone knew about what happened last night. The little girl gave Holy Sun Mi Yen and his group 3 rooms in total, but each room was unfurnished. The room was completely empty. It would be extremely difficult to even find a bed or a blanket, let alone any other furniture or furnishings. No, there was nothing. It must have been hard on Holy Sun Mi Yen and his group. They had to make do with sleeping on the floor for the whole night. At this moment, they all had panda eyes and looked listless. It was obvious that they did not sleep well. Mi Yen and his group were glaring at Arbor and his group. This was simply not a day for humans. The priests were silently criticizing in their hearts. Chapter 2804. Usually, when they were patrolling the Sun Moon Temple, they were always the center of attention and respected by everyone. How dare the Crown Prince of the Divine Land and his people neglect them like this? Xiao Mu and the others were currently eating breakfast around an 8-seater table. Looking back, Qi Xianxian almost laughed out loud. A priest took out a slightly old-school desk from his inner world with a dark face, placed a bench in front of the table, and invited the Holy Sun to sit down. She didn't know from which shabby warehouse in the academy this guy stole such an old desk and chair to make up the number. Although the Holy Sun's handsome face was also dark, he still sat down. Soon, the priest placed a set of bowls and chopsticks, and a guard came in with a pot of hot porridge and a few dishes. As a spiritual venerable, it didn't matter whether he ate or not. It was just that this Holy Sun had a habit of eating twice in the morning and at noon, unless he was in seclusion for cultivation. The meal was prepared by the 2 priests in the room. Holy Sun Mi Yen ate a few mouthfuls, and put down the spoon with some grievance in his heart. He couldn't eat anymore. The main reason was that he was sitting in front of an old desk, surrounded by a group of onlookers. He was used to being arrogant and had never been ridiculed like this. Under such gazes, he was naturally dissatisfied. Holy Sun Mi Yen threw down the chopsticks angrily, stood up, and walked out first. Seeing that their master was in a bad mood, the priests and guards didn't dare to say anything, and hurriedly followed him out. Mi Yen sneered in his heart, "I'll let you be happy for a while, and you'll be in for a good show later." When Arbor and the others arrived at the practice field yesterday, there were already many old and new students lined up there, waiting for the mentors to come. Upon seeing Xiao Mu's appearance, many people retreated to the sides in terror, and a rather spacious path actually appeared in the center. It was as if Miss Xiao was some kind of scourge. Everyone looked at her cautiously. Qi Xianxian stared at those people one by one, and thought, "Our Jojo is not a beast that goes berserk everywhere. If you don't provoke her, nothing will happen." Morning. Jojo. Eldest young Sir Qin walked over from the crowd and waved at Arbor with a smile. Arbor looked up at him and saw Omega Katoka standing beside him, looking at her with an unreadable expression. Mo Lien immediately sensed Sir Chiao Chiao's grip on his hand tighten slightly. He furrowed his brows and reached out to hold her hand gently. Looking at the group of people in front of them, he said coldly, "Make way." Eldest young Sir Qin pursed his lips and shuffled slightly to the side. Arbor and Mo Lien walked to the front of the group and found an empty space to stand. The group of senior students couldn't help but sneak glances at them, secretly sizing them up. Dean Yun led a group of consecrators and tutors to the practice field very quickly. Looking at the group of energetic students below, he nodded with a smile and said, "Today's main purpose is to help the new students divide the subjects." During the test, everyone had been tested according to the contents of the invitation letter. For example, the alchemists were naturally tested for pill refinement, and the artificers were tested for weapon forging. Most of them were naturally cultivators. The cultivators' test was the simplest, they just had to pass the corresponding test steals. Chapter 2805. For the pure cultivation subject, all 322 new students this year will be led by Instructor Ma and Instructor Gao. Those whose names are being read, please stand behind the two instructors. Forging branch, 21 new students this year will be led by Instructor Zhang. Pill branch, 33 new students will be led by Instructor Jing from now on. Talisman branch, 5 new students will be led by Instructor Zhang. Concealed weapons branch, 59 new students. Zither branch, led by calligraphy and painting. Arbor dozed off as he listened. After the two instructors helped Dean Yun read everyone's names, 2 hours had passed, and the school's subject assignment finally ended. The little fellow stood alone in front of the new students. She looked left and right with a baffled expression. Why was she the only one who hadn't found a group? Just now, Mo Lien had also been called to stand at the forging branch. She was the only one who hadn't been claimed. The entire practice field was silent. At this moment, everyone's gazes were on Arbor. On the large practice field, all the students were lined up according to their assigned subjects. Both the new and old students were lined up in order. Our dear Qiao Mu's small face instantly darkened. Qi Xianxian and company, who had long been herded into the new students group, couldn't help but facepalm. Seriously, he didn't know what had happened again. Why did he leave their little stoic behind? One of the accompanying instructors quickly poked Dean Yun, indicating for him to quickly look at the little stoic's expression. This stoic face looked like she was about to explode. Only then did Dean Yun realize what was going on. He looked at the little girl with a chuckle and said, "Student Qiao, which subject do you want to study in? You can choose the cultivation hall, pill hall, or talisman hall." It was evident that this Dean Yun already had a thorough understanding of the little stoic situation. He knew that she wasn't only a cultivator with outstanding talent, but she was also an alchemist and talisman practitioner. The little fellow's foul expression improved slightly, and she cast a glance in her husband's direction. Her husband was enthusiastically dragged over by the weapon forging hall's instructors. She didn't have any talent in weapon forging, so she naturally couldn't follow along. Mo Lien also felt unbearably vexed. He had originally already started walking towards the cultivation hole. But he didn't expect to be stopped by this instructor Zhang halfway. After a series of exaggerated explanations, he was led to the refining hall in a daze. However, the royal school was also quite interesting. He rarely revealed his talent in refining in front of others, so he didn't know where they found out about this. Of course he wanted to go to the cultivation hall with his wife, but now when Instructor Zhang saw him move, he immediately ran up to him and stared at him, earnestly advising him. If he were to stay in the refining hall, he would be able to take part in the cultivation hall as a subsidiary subject. In the future, he would be able to participate in the Heaven Yuan ranking competition. There were many benefits to staying in the weapon refining hall. Every month, he could even obtain a lot of forging materials. Hearing this, Crown Prince Mo's head swelled again. He felt that this meant her probably hadn't talked to anyone for several hundred years, so she was terribly talkative. Because of this delay, the little stoic decisively chose the cultivation hole. The reason was very simple. Mo Lien went to the weapon forging branch, Duan Yu went to the concealed weapons branch, and the Qin Estates people basically stayed in the pill hall, so she definitely wouldn't go to the pill hole. There probably wasn't much to learn in a place like the Talisman Hole. She already had the complete talisman technique, the Golden Talisman Jade Tome, so she naturally didn't need anything else. Also wait. Chapter 2806. Therefore, after picking and choosing, she felt that the cultivation hall was the most perfect one. In the future, she would be able to train, have fun, with her friends again. Arbor expressionlessly walked towards the cultivation hall freshman. Everyone retreated to the sides, their gazes filled with respect. What a joke, they didn't want to provoke a fellow who could summon a giant sand scorpion at any time. Xiao Mu disapproved of their attitude, and she ran to stand beside her teammates, the little fatty, and the others. Qi Xuanxuan's face was filled with joy as she pulled Arbor's hand and said, "That's great, we can train and play together again." The word play at the end was probably the main point, little fatty and the rest added in their hearts. Arbor nodded his head, his large watery eyes curving. Just as he was about to say something, a loud voice resounded throughout the entire training grounds. "I heard that there are many new symbol masters in the academy. I, Jin Zhaoyang, would like to challenge them. I wonder who dares to accept my challenge." Holy Sun Mi Yen stood beside the dean. When he heard this voice, the corners of his mouth curled up into a casual smile. "Here it comes." Principal Yun frowned and immediately rejected. "Today is not the day of the sparring session. If you want to spar, wait for another day, Principal. I am very much looking forward to seeing the outstanding performance of these new students. Don't you all want to see the strength of these new symbol masters?" The man named Jin Zhaoyang flashed and arrived in front of the crowd. Duan Muqing glanced at that person and said indifferently, "This person looks young, but he should be in his early 50s. Arbor's and Qi Xuanxuan's jaws almost dropped to the ground. "He hasn't graduated at the age of 50. Little Fatty pursed his lips and said, "Maybe he just entered the academy not long ago." After all, the Imperial Academy doesn't have an age limit when it comes to recruiting talents. The two little girls thought about it and nodded at each other. "Jojo, you have to be careful. I'm afraid this person is coming for you." Duan Muqing saw that Jin Zhaoyang's gaze was sweeping towards them and said coldly. Lu Yu rubbed his chin. "I think we should be careful of this Jin Zhaoyang. I heard that among the new talisman masters, there are 2 talisman masters from the talisman aristocratic families of the Divine Prefecture." Jin Zhaoyang laughed and said, "I wonder where these 2 talisman masters are." Mu Roshuan did not expect that this fire would actually burn her. She could not help but be slightly stunned. Pursing her lips, she lightly moved her feet and walked out of the crowd. "I'm Mu Roshuan. Greetings, senior brother." "Ha ha ha ha." Jin Zhaoyang nodded repeatedly. Good, good. He was courageous, but what about his strength? "Little junior sister, let's set the limit at 3 offensive talismans. If you can withstand 3 of my offensive talismans, then it's your win." Senior brother Jin Zhaoyang was originally from the Tsang Prefecture and came from the Tsang Prefecture's talisman Qi clan. Later on, for some unknown reason, he fell out with the Tsang Prefecture's Qi clan and left the clan. Until now, he has been alone. Someone at the side relished in talking about Jin Zhaoyang and shared the gossip he had obtained with others. Immediately, it attracted many people's attention. Senior brother Jin Zhaoyang seems to have broken through the yellow rank Great Talisman Master proficiency level and reached the yellow rank Great Talisman Master perfection stage. When this was said, the surrounding people were in an uproar and exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 2807. In everyone's opinion, a perfected yellow rank Great Talisman Master in her early 50s had a limitless future. However, when Mu Roxuan made her move, everyone marveled at the fact that this young lady was actually able to take on 2 consecutive powerful attack talismans from a yellow rank Great Talisman Master. Mu Roxuan pursed her lips, her face as dark as water. The defensive talisman array around her was made up of 24 jade talismans, emitting a faint jade luster. Defensive jade talisman array. As expected of the Mu family's eldest miss. A jade talisman array right off the bat. Opposite her, Jin Zhaoyang smiled at Mu Roxuan. Junior sister, you didn't draw this defensive jade talisman array yourself. Even if you barely beat me, it's still an unfair victory. Zhongli Zi frowned slightly and said indifferently, Senior brother Jin, you're already 50 years old. Bullying a 17-year-old junior sister doesn't seem so honorable. Jin Zhaoyang's face darkened. Snickers sounded from the surroundings. Mu Roxuan cast a grateful look at Zhongli Zi. When she turned to face Jin Zhaoyang, she focused all her attention on dealing with him. She was only a mid-stage black rank Great Talisman Master and was far from perfected black rank. She definitely wouldn't be able to take on the opponent's attack talismans. Therefore, the defensive jade talisman array she was using right now was made by 7th Uncle Mu Jingrui. However, she had used this jade talisman array many times before. She didn't know if it could block Jin Zhaoyang's attack talismans, which were getting stronger and stronger each time. Junior sister, this is the last attack. Pay attention. Jin Zhaoyang smiled smugly and suddenly waved his right hand. A jade talisman flew toward Mu Roxuan at lightning speed and arrived in front of her with a whoosh. The light from the attack shone brightly. Mu Roxuan was knocked back more than 10 meters by the attack. Her feet dragged out 2 long white marks on the ground as she coughed and spat out a small mouthful of blood. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but her eyes were filled with an unyielding gaze. Her body stiffened as she stood firmly. In less than 3 seconds, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Mu Xingqian leaped in front of her and hurriedly reached out to support her. He turned around and coldly looked at Jin Zhaoyang, saying in a deep voice, Surnamed Jin, if you want to compete, just come at me. Bullying a new student, what kind of hero are you? When everyone saw that Mu Roxuan was beaten to the point of vomiting blood, a trace of sympathy immediately appeared in their eyes. This Jin Zhaoyang was going too far. Moreover, Mu Roxuan herself was not weak. She was able to withstand 2 of Jin Zhaoyang's attacks at such a young age. It was not easy for Mu Roxuan to stand up straight under such a fierce attack for the 3rd time. Compared to Jin Zhaoyang's pressing step by step, Miss Mu seemed to have the demeanor of a large sect. It was a glorious defeat. Jin Zhaoyang forced a smile and said, Senior brother Mu, you're not thinking of standing up for your younger sister, are you? Why not? Mu Xingqian sneered. As a member of the Mu family, how could he be a coward who could watch outsiders bully his Mu family? Big brother. Mu Roxuan pressed his hand, coughed a few times, and pulled him back. She was not as skilled as him, so she had to admit defeat. A complicated light flashed through Mu Roxuan's eyes. Being slapped in the face on the first day of school was tantamount to ringing an alarm bell in her ears. In the past, when they competed in the family, others did not dare to kill her because of her status. Chapter 2808. However, that didn't mean that there wasn't anyone in the younger generation who could defeat her. Perhaps there was always someone better out there. There were also some hidden talents in the family who might not necessarily be inferior to her. She had been too arrogant in the past. Cough, cough, cough. Mu Rochuan looked coldly at Jin Zhaoyang. At this moment, there was a subtle change in her state of mind. With Mu Xingqian's support, Mu Rochuan straightened her back and wiped the blood from her mouth with her sleeve. I lost. She sneered. But when I'm 50, I might not lose to you. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help but snicker. Wasn't that right? Miss Mu had just turned 17 and already had the ability to fight Jin Zhaoyang. In another 30 years or so, with Miss Mu's talisman aptitude, she would most likely surpass Jin Zhaoyang and crush him. Jin Zhaoyang's face darkened again. His mouth twitched, and he said with a fake smile, I heard that a heaven-level great talisman master appeared in your Mu family in the past 300 years. A hint of anger appeared in Mu Xingqian's eyes. Jin Zhaoyang chuckled. I heard his name is Mu Zhaoyang, your patriarch Zhaoyang. Ha ha ha, I'm Jin Zhaoyang, and he's Mu Zhaoyang. Do you think I'll be like your patriarch Zhaoyang in the future, with a bright future that can't be underestimated? Ha ha ha. How dare you? Mu Rochuan trembled with anger. This person actually verbally took advantage of their Mu family. How dare he dream of being on par with their patriarch Zhaoyang with his cowardly appearance? How preposterous! Jin Zhaoyang waved his hand and said with a smile. I heard that your Mu family has 2 new students entering the school this year. Why don't I see the other one? Could it be that he's too scared to come out? The young masters from the Qin estate, the 2 from the Dou family, and the disciples from the aristocratic families of the Divine Province couldn't help but roll their eyes at the same time. Here it comes again, it hasn't even been 2 minutes, and he's courting death again. The scene of the little girl releasing the sand scorpion yesterday was still floating in front of their eyes. Today, there's someone courting death again. The group of students silently took a few steps back, leaving a large circle in the middle to let Jin Zhaoyang's heart's desire. They didn't want the innocent to be implicated. Arbor frowned and walked to Mu Xingqian and Mu Rochuan's side. He stared at Jin Zhaoyang with a bone-chilling gaze. Why are you being so long-winded? From the very beginning, this person had been noisy to no end. Arbor expressed that her patience had long since run out. Jin Zhaoyang's face was cold as he stared at the little girl who was like a jade statue. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he once again revealed that infuriating smile. You're the other newly admitted Mu clan disciple? Arbor didn't deny it or admit it. He just looked at him coldly and asked, do you want to die? Everyone was speechless. Jin Zhaoyang clearly didn't understand his current situation. He frowned and said with displeasure, little girl, please be more polite. You don't have to be polite to a dog of the Sun Moon Temple. As soon as these words came out, the entire crowd couldn't help but go into an uproar. Everyone's gaze shifted to the Holy Sun, who was standing silently at the side. Holy Sun Mi Yen was obviously slightly taken aback, and then he said coldly, you probably misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand. Arbor interrupted the Holy Sun without allowing him to explain. Chapter 2809. The little fellow said indifferently, this dog of yours knows how to look at its master's face the moment it appears. In the process of fighting with Mu Rochuan, it looked at your master's face 3 times in a row. Since you were targeting me from the beginning, why use the Mu clan's name? The little girl mocked him politely, don't you know my relationship with the Mu clan? Why use the Mu clan as a fig leaf? Then come at me, be a bit more open and aboveboard. When the little girl retorted, she was used to firing off a torrent, sweeping away her usual quiet appearance. Prince Mo was very happy to see this. The little girl was so energetic. But as the one being rebuked, he was so depressed that he wanted to die. Holy Sun Miyan's expression was already extremely ugly as he coldly swept a glance at a priest beside him. That priest hurriedly stepped forward and explained in a deep voice, "Little girl, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. This is a private matter between your Imperial Academy students. Why drag our Sun Moon Temple into it? Whether it is or not, you know in your heart." Arbor raised his hand to interrupt him and turned to look at Jin Zhaoyang. "You're called Jin Zhaoyang?" "That's right." Jin Zhaoyang raised his chin high, his face insufferably arrogant. "Do you think your bug-like appearance is comparable to old ancestor Zhaoyang?" "Bug-like appearance?" Jin Zhaoyang glared at Arbor in annoyance, his face instantly turning green. This little girl had guts, actually calling him a bug-like appearance. Arbor didn't give him a chance to question and just continued with a sneer, "Don't you know what kind of person Mu Zhaoyang is? The talisman array drawn by old ancestor Zhaoyang 300 years ago can still be used today. Can you do it? You know what kind of bug-like appearance you are. You're obviously a bug, yet you want to be shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Simply ridiculous, you have no self-awareness." Jin Zhaoyang was so angry that his hair stood on end. Good. If he didn't teach this audacious girl a lesson today, how could he continue to establish himself in the Imperial Academy? What's so good about it? Arbor looked at Jin Zhaoyang as if he was looking at an idiot. His cold gaze swept across Jin Zhaoyang's swollen face. With a slight movement of her finger, a jade talisman with flowing light appeared in her slender white palm. The little girl said expressionlessly, "If you can take this jade talisman of mine, then I will give it to you. Take it as my loss." Arbor said coldly, "If you can't take it, then immediately change your name to Golden Dog and get out of the royal school. Do you dare to bet?" Jin Zhaoyang was so angry that he clenched his fists and shouted angrily, You, ha ha. How arrogant. Just by relying on an offensive jade talisman, he was trying in vain to make a yellow rank great talisman master like him unable to receive it. Ha. What a joke. Little girl, the world doesn't revolve around you. Of course the world doesn't revolve around me, Arbor said coldly. There's always someone better than you. Even a 3-year-old child knows this. But against you. Arbor looked down indifferently at the jade talisman in her hand and coldly spat out 3 words, "Enough." "You!" Jin Zhaoyang shouted angrily, "Good. Today, if I can't take this offensive jade talisman of yours, my name Jin Zhaoyang will be read backwards from now on. Yang Zhaojin." Arbor nodded, "That's a phrase, remember it." Chapter 28:10. Jin Zhaoyang's expression was extremely unsightly. Today's matter had turned out like this, it could not be considered amicable. A trace of murderous intent flitted across his eyes. What if I accept? I don't want your apology, I want your right hand. Do you dare to bet? Jin Zhaoyang's eyes were full of provocation, anticipating that the little girl would not dare to accept this bet. How dare you? Yun Piaomiao angrily rebuked. A trace of mockery flashed across Mo Lian's eyes, and she said faintly, "Dean Yun, don't worry. He won't be able to jump around for long." Dean Yun was really anxious. He knew Jin Zhaoyang's strength very well. At the little girl's age and coming up from the lower realm, it was already not bad for her to reach the advanced level perfected talisman master level that Mu Jingrui had mentioned. This wager with one hand was no joke. How would a talisman master draw talismans in the future if he lost a hand? These young children were too impulsive. If it was a normal competition of cultivation, even if the little girl's cultivation was insufficient, she would not lose to Jin Zhaoyang by too much with Sand Scorpion's help. But now, it was a competition of talisman power. Mu Rochuan could become a yellow-level talisman master at the age of 17 because she had an innate advantage, and the entire talisman family in the Divine Continent had contributed greatly to her cultivation. But the little girl was someone who had just come up from the lower star region. It was hard to believe that she had the power to fight Jin Zhaoyang. Cut the crap, take it. How could Arbor have the patience to continue chattering with Jin Zhaoyang? She directly raised her white hand, and a jade-white stream of light flew towards Jin Zhaoyang. A cold sneer hung on Jin Zhaoyang's lips as he raised his hand and swept the air in front of him. 24 defensive jade talismans jumped out and emitted white light in front of him. They suddenly formed a circle, enveloping his entire person in a defensive jade talisman array. The talisman masters could see that a transparent barrier had been erected around Jin Zhaoyang. It was like a safety shield, enclosing him within it. Just with that offensive jade talisman. It was absolutely impossible to break through this yellow-level defensive jade talisman array. The talisman masters could not help but sigh and shake their heads. The little girl was too naive. How could an offensive jade talisman be enough to deal with a yellow-level perfected talisman master? Even if they formed an offensive jade talisman array, they might not be able to break through the opponent's defensive talisman array. The difference was too great. Boom! A deafening sound suddenly rang out, and even the ground here was trembling from the mighty force of the attack. Cough, cough, cough. Everyone waved their hands and brushed away the faint white mist in front of them. Surprisingly, Jin Zhaoyang was actually forced to retreat several steps by the power of the jade talisman. You've lost. Jin Zhaoyang glared angrily. He was secretly surprised. He didn't expect the little girl's offensive jade talisman to have such power. Fortunately, his defensive array glyphs were strong enough to resist the attack. As a result, clear cracks appeared on his talisman array. Jin Zhaoyang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. His face was saved. Next, he just needed to withstand the pressure and make this arrogant little girl cripple her own right arm. You're too naive. Arbor's cold voice entered his ears. Following that, an even more powerful wave of attacks rushed out from the jade talisman and landed on his body. What? Everyone looked at the jade talisman suspended in midair with shocked expressions. The third, fourth, and fifth wave of attacks broke through the wind and waves. Chapter 28:11. The rumbling sound of the impact was incessant. When blocking the second wave of attacks, Jin Zhaoyang barely managed to use the second set of backup defensive talisman arrays. Unfortunately, this set of defensive talisman arrays was obviously not as useful as the previous set of talisman arrays, and it was instantly destroyed by the attack talisman power. The talisman power hit his left shoulder, and Jin Zhaoyang's entire body swayed backward. When the third wave of attacks came, Jin Zhaoyang's expression changed greatly, and he could only activate the defensive ring on his body to block it. At this point, he had clearly lost. Since it was a talisman competition, he was obviously defeated now that he had used other aids. However, at that critical moment, he really couldn't care too much about saving his life. With great difficulty, he managed to block the attacks in a flurry. The fourth and fifth waves of attacks came majestically. For a moment, the entire practice field was silent, and even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone inexplicably held their breaths as they watched the scene before them, almost forgetting to speak. Mu Xingqian was especially shocked. As the saying went, the layman only watched the show, while the expert could see the knack. In the eyes of other laymen, they only felt waves of talisman power stronger than the previous wave, blowing strong winds from the side and landing heavily on Jin Zhaoyang's defensive barrier. And in the eyes of Mu Xingqian and Mu Rochuan, what they noticed even more was that the jade talisman that the little girl flicked out continuously released 5 waves of attacks. If in a real battle, throwing out such a number of jade talismans would be so terrifying that it would make one's hair stand on end. Mu Rochuan's eyes were wide open. She recalled the first time she saw the little girl in the corridor. She held a blue storage talisman in her hand, and even Rian coveted that blue talisman in her hand, wanting to take it for herself. Could it be that she really was a talisman master? But, was that possible? Mu Rochuan's expression turned somewhat ugly for a moment. She was somewhat unable to believe that a girl who grew up outside the Mu family would have better talisman skills than her. After all, the two of them didn't really compete at that time in the corridor. The result of the competition was left undecided in a ridiculous way. After that, Mu Rochuan subconsciously forgot about this matter, and was blindly excited as she drew a yellow storage talisman in the corridor. Because of this, she was even praised by her grandfather and admired by her family. Moreover, just like earlier, wasn't Arbor not joining the Talisman Hall precisely because she was afraid of this genius talisman eldest young miss, and didn't want her edge to be overshadowed by her? She had always been confident in her talisman skills. He didn't expect to receive so many blows today. Moreover, watching Arbor defeat Jin Zhaoyang was even more painful than losing to Jin Zhaoyang herself. After all, she didn't feel guilty about losing to Jin Zhaoyang. She was much younger than Jin Zhaoyang, so wasn't it normal for her to lose? And if Arbor could easily defeat Jin Zhaoyang, how would others view her, the genius eldest young miss of a talisman aristocratic family? They would definitely say that she, the genius first miss of the Divine Land's talisman aristocratic family, was actually inferior to a little girl who had been wandering outside the Mu family for many years. Mu Rochuan's fingers curled up tightly. Her state of mind underwent a subtle change once again. She had always thought that at her age, there was basically no one who could match up to her in terms of talisman skills. But now, reality slapped her in the face. Someone had surpassed her, and was actually a year younger than her. Chapter 28:12. Just now, she felt that she couldn't be too arrogant and had to broaden her horizons. Among the younger generation of the family, there might be someone more outstanding than her, right? But this might not necessarily include Qiao Mu at all right. She simply could not accept that Qiao Mu had surpassed her, Mu Rochuan. It was much better for anyone to surpass her than Arbor. How could she allow Arbor to surpass her? Mu Rochuan seemed to see the disappointment in her parents' eyes when they looked at her. They had painstakingly nurtured a beautiful daughter who was already inferior to others in terms of looks. At this moment, even the talisman art that the family had always been proud of was far inferior to others. Mu Rochuan's face turned deathly pale from the huge blow she received. When she stole a glance at her brother beside her, she felt a piercing pain in her heart. At this moment, eldest brother's bright gaze was completely focused on Qiao Mu. In his eyes, there was only Arbor. That girl was his most outstanding younger sister. She had completely lost herself. Did this mean that in the future, her father, grandfather, uncles, and even everyone in the family would lose sight of her, Mu Rochuan, and only Arbor? Crack! An almost inaudible shattering sound made her heart sink. She instantly came back to her senses. Mu Rochuan lowered her eyes, her face slightly distorted. Just now, a crack had appeared in her Dantian's spiritual ruin realm. It actually caused the spiritual ruin realm to shatter because of the sudden impact on her mental state. Mu Rochuan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Jin Zhaoyang's setback wasn't any better than hers. Jin Zhaoyang had never expected that he would lose. At this moment, he was still in a daze. He sat paralyzed on the ground, not knowing what had happened. The fourth wave of attacks had broken 2 ribs in his chest. How could he dare to resist the 5th wave of attacks? Although he had avoided it, the deep pit behind him repeatedly indicated that he had lost. He had lost. He had lost completely in front of everyone. He had lost all his dignity. He subconsciously looked in the direction of Holy Sun Mi Yen. The Holy Sun's handsome face was dark and gloomy. He pursed his lips tightly. Although he didn't say anything, the suppressed displeasure in his eyes was obvious. She originally wanted to find someone to slap her in the face and teach the stoic face a good lesson, but in the end, things completely went against her wishes. The little stoic coldly glanced at Jin Chaoyang and said dryly, "Young Chao Jin, you must accept your loss. Get out of the Imperial Academy immediately." Young Chao Jin. Everyone silently looked at Jin Chaoyang, who was paralyzed on the ground. The little girl immediately read the other party's name upside down. All right, since he lost the bet, Jin Chaoyang could only accept it. You don't go too far. Jin Chaoyang's face darkened, and his lips trembled as he spoke. The little stoic immediately looked at Headmaster Yun impatiently. Why are all the students in your academy so unreasonable? He was the one who wanted to challenge me, and now he's the one who refuses to admit defeat. How can you have the face to be my classmate with such a vile character? Why aren't you telling him to get the hell out of my sight? If you continue to be long-winded, I'll kill you. The little stoic's patience was completely exhausted. Her black eyes coldly glanced at Jin Chaoyang. Do you understand? Jin Chaoyang shuddered, and his entire body quivered. He looked pleadingly at Headmaster Yun beside him. Headmaster Yun expressed that he wanted to help, but was unable to. Chapter 28:13. Headmaster Yun was truly powerless. From yesterday until today, how many jokes had he caused by challenging the little stoic? Could anyone with a discerning eye not tell? How awesome you thought you were earlier was how much of a slap to your face now. Didn't you see so many students looking at you with sympathetic gazes? You truly couldn't be stopped from courting death. Jin Chaoyang saw the headmaster's strange gaze. He clearly didn't plan on helping him. He hesitated for a second before suddenly pointing at Arbor and shouting, "She cheated. Headmaster, she cheated. She definitely threw out 5 offensive jade talismans just now. Didn't everyone see it with their own eyes? Just now, I received 5 attacks. A total of 5. Jin Chaoyang stretched out 5 fingers in a final struggle and jumped up to shout harshly. Cough, cough, cough. Because 2 of his ribs were broken, his lungs sucked in another burst of cold air from his shouting. It hurt so much that cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and he coughed violently. He could only slowly lower the speed and volume of his speech. As everyone knows, an offensive jade talisman can only release 1 attack, but just now, a frog at the bottom of a well, ignorant and ill-informed. Arbor coldly interrupted his noisy speech and swept him an indifferent glance. You haven't seen it before, he hasn't seen it before, and everyone hasn't seen it before, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in this world. You should go and understand how big the world is. The little stoic angrily rebuked the old man in front of her. She didn't give him any face at all. This is a multi-attack jade talisman. The little stoic had always been too lazy to explain, but now, she felt the need to have a good talk with this ignorant and ill-informed fellow. With my current ability, I can only inscribe 5. But the ancestor Chao Yang you slandered previously, he once inscribed 7. 7-level offensive talismans. Have you heard of it? Everyone was stupefied. Everyone, including Mu Xingqian and Mu Roxuan, looked at the little lady in front of them as if they were listening to a fantasy story. How did you know? Mu Roxuan asked in a trembling voice. The tip of her heart started to tremble along with it. Could it be that the little girl had the opportunity to learn the art of talisman from old ancestor Xiaoyang? If that was the case, then her strange and unfathomable talisman technique would make sense. Arbor naturally wouldn't explain it to Mu Rochuan. Because the topic that was brought up was a long time ago. The Holy Water Sect's old sect master was Mu Xiaoyang's best friend despite their age difference. She had heard a lot about Mu Xiaoyang's life stories during their casual chats. However, at that time, she still didn't know that this old man was her ancestor. She only felt that this old man's natural disposition was heroic, candid, and magnanimous. Moreover, his talisman technique was superb, and his character and cultivation were extremely admirable. Just now, Jin Xiaoyang dared to slander and defame her idol. This was naturally intolerable. It wasn't that she had to stand up for Mu Rochuan. She did not care about what Mu Rochuan was like. It was just that no one dared to insult the idol that she had admired since she was young. Her small hand slid over the white jade bracelet engraved with green bamboo on her wrist. The talisman matrix that old ancestor Zhao Yang left behind at the Maple Pavilion 300 years ago helped the Holy Water sect preserve the entire Maple Pavilion during the Six Prefectures invasion. With such boldness and ability, he was not only a master of his generation, but also a grandmaster of his generation. How could Jin Xiaoyang, this stinking bug, be mentioned in the same breath as him? He wasn't even fit to carry his shoes. Chapter 28:14. Arbor looked coldly at Jin Xiaoyang, who was sitting on the ground. His gaze swept across Jin Xiaoyang's face. Do you think that a jade talisman can only be used for one purpose? Attack or defense? It was a big mistake. Ever since the 9th jade talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome was activated, her actual talisman drawing skills had advanced from the black level complete circle to the earth level entry stage. A small yellow level talisman master jumping in front of her, wasn't it just a matter of being slapped? Qiao Mu couldn't be bothered to continue speaking, so she turned around and stomped towards Mo Lian. Hurry and get out of here. That young Zhao Jin, I don't even want to look at him. A trace of anger flashed across Jin Xiaoyang's eyes. He struggled to stand up, still wanting to argue with Arbor and the others. Principal Yun sighed and waved his hand to let someone take him away. Jin Xiaoyang's argument was really laughable. Just now, everyone was not blind. Everyone saw that from the beginning to the end, Jin Xiaoyang was attacked by only one jade talisman. Where did the 5 jade talismans come from? When Jin Xiaoyang was taken away, he still angrily yelled twice, unwilling to submit. Until he was dragged out of the practice field, that ear-piercing sound finally stopped. Mo Lian's cold eyes calmly swept towards the direction Jin Xiaoyang left. Her eyes were abnormally cold and her fingertips quickly swiped under her sleeves. The word bind was left on the jade talisman. At the same time, a group of hidden guards outside the royal school received the crown prince's instructions. When Jin Xiaoyang was pushed out of the royal school, the big gift that greeted him was a snow-white flash of sword light. Tian Yun's people have even infiltrated the royal school. On the way back to Winter Forest Court, Arbor frowned and said. Perhaps without them knowing, Tian Yun had already infiltrated the big families of the 3 continents. He thought of the corpse puppet that appeared in the Mu family's backyard. Qiao Mu creased her brows. Could it be that there were also people from Tian Yun in the Mu family? Could Shi Huixin be related to Tian Yun? If that's the case, doesn't that mean that Tian Yun's people have been lurking in the Mu family for at least 10 years? They returned to Donglin Garden, changed their clothes, and had dinner. After a while, Holy Sun Mi Yen and the others also came back. They glanced at Arbor coldly. Arbor raised the corners of his mouth. Holy Sun Mi Yen actually came back. She had really underestimated how thick-skinned this Holy Sun was. Both sides had already shed all pretense of cordiality, yet he could still bring his men back to Donglin Garden as if nothing had happened. I have already paid the fee. Holy Sun Mayan said angrily and led his men to his unfinished house. He had already paid for 5 days of accommodation. No matter what, he had to make up for it. The little stoic and her companions looked at each other in dismay. For some reason, they felt that this lofty Sir Holy Sun seemed to be a bit down to earth. An hour later, a message was delivered to Holy Sun Mayan. My lord, Jin Xiaoyang has been taken care of. Holy Sun Mayan smashed a small square table into pieces with a slap. The priest accompanying him on the side couldn't help but twitch his eyelids. Heavens, Sir Holy Sun smashed the only table in the house that could hold a tea set. The enemy was even more powerful than he had imagined. That damn crown prince of the divine province, this black-hearted and merciless guy. He must have secretly sent people to take care of Jin Xiaoyang. Chapter 28:15. Damn it, Jin Xiaoyang was actually of some use. After all, he was already a yellow-level talisman practitioner. Where is he? Holy Sun Mi Yen asked solemnly. The corpse can't be found anymore. The air rippled slightly. A man wearing a white robe and a white scarf that only revealed his eyes stood next to Holy Sun Mi Yen and reported with his head bowed. Damn it. Holy Sun Mi Yen cursed again. The teacup in his hand cracked with a soft shattering sound before ultimately shattering into powder. The tea dripped down Mi Yan's palm and dripped onto the floor. The priests in the room didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It would be fine if Jin Xiaoyang's corpse didn't even exist, but if that corpse was taken back for research, Holy Sun Mi Yen creased his brows and thought, the crown prince of the divine province shouldn't be so troublesome. He must have sent people to clean up that punk. Are you sure he's dead? Yes. That white-robed man nodded submissively. There are still many bloodstains on the ground. Judging from the amount of blood, he was destined to die. Emichim, Holy Sun Mi Yen coldly said, they're all useless people. Holy Sun, then what should we do next? A priest quickly fawned over him. Don't tell me we're going to let that little stoic continue running rampant like this. Let her be happy for a few days first. Holy Sun Mi Yen snorted. When we enter the Sun-Moon mystery realm, she'll be in big trouble. On the other side, Prince Mo glanced at the little fellow who was already sound asleep. He stroked her face with his fingers before leaving in the middle of the night. However, just as he reached Donglin Park's entrance, he discovered a tall black figure leaning against the wall, seemingly waiting for him for a long time. Mo Lien rolled her eyes. What? You did it. Our dear Duanyu jumped out from the corner and sized him up in confusion. It's the middle of the night. Why didn't you change your clothes before going out? He was still wearing the snow-white academy uniform from the day. It was so white that it reflected light in the night. Mo Lien silently glanced at Duanyu, who was wearing a black skin-tight suit. You were a thief. I followed you. What an annoying fellow. Crown Prince Mo grumpily glared at him again. Are you sure you want to meddle in this matter? That's right, it's everyone's responsibility to deal with an organization like Tianyun, isn't it? Every man has his own responsibility. He's just harboring ill intentions towards my wife. Crown Prince Mo harumphed before turning around, his figure flitting into the night. Duanyu naturally hurried to catch up, and he even commented rather noisily, I went out to take a look just now, and the scene was filled with blood and minced meat. What the hell is that? Since Jin Xiaoyang was not dead, it meant that the things on the ground were not him. The minced meat is naturally his. Mo Lien coldly curled her lips. Anyway, it was fine as long as he didn't die completely. As for blood, just add some chicken blood to it. By making the scene a little more disgusting, they would naturally be able to fool everyone. Is it Jin Xiaoyang's life lantern? It's with me. Mo Lien said faintly, just block his life lantern. Holy Sun Mi Yen shouldn't be able to sense this person at all now. This person was still so cautious when doing things, Duan Yu inwardly thought. Holy Sun Mi Yen truly had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to be enemies with this person. Those who want to harm my Jojo naturally have to pay the corresponding price. Mo Lien only summoned Little Seven when they were far away from the academy. Chapter 28:16. The two swiftly rode the dragon and stealthily arrived at the southern side of north-facing Great Forest under the cover of the night. They followed the Jade Messenger talisman to a valley. Duan Yu was a bit unsettled. This punk had only been here for 2 days, yet he had already found a place to contact and settle down. From the looks of it, he had already sent people to settle down in this small valley. This small valley was hidden in the southern side of north-facing Great Forest. The valley entrance was usually filled with miasma and poisonous insects, so people rarely came here. Duan Yu looked at the stone tablet erected at the valley entrance. The 2 words, north-facing, had already peeled off and become unrecognizable. The stone tablet had been worn down with the passage of time, as if someone had lived here several hundred years ago. North-facing valley. Duan Yu's puzzled gaze swept towards Mo Lien. The latter nodded slightly. This north-facing valley entrance is protected by a talisman matrix, so it's quite hidden. I sent people in to take a look. Someone should have lived here before. However, there hasn't been anyone living here for the past few decades. I think this place is a bit small, but it's not a bad place to settle down temporarily, so I had some people move in and stay nearby. Duan Yu, you planted so many people here in north-facing Great Forest, but did you inform the nearby mercenary groups? Mo Lien gave him a, you still need to inform them, look. Duan Yu thought it made sense. With this guy's personality, he would probably eliminate anyone who came to provoke him. What was the point of informing them? North-facing Great Forest was a large dye vat where the strong preyed on the weak to begin with. There were all sorts of factions here, so it was inevitable that Prince Mo would attract covetous eyes when he brought people to settle down in the southern side. It was normal for him to be targeted. Thankfully, we haven't been stationed here for long. The nearby large level 5 and level 6 mercenary groups should still be observing for now. The other small gangs don't have much of an impact on us. As they spoke, the two had already entered the small valley under the guidance of a black-clothed youth and headed straight for the dungeon. This dungeon was actually a converted cave. 2 rows of torches hung on the walls on both sides, illuminating the inside of the cave. Hui Feng walked up and saluted Prince Mo and Duan Yu with a chuckle. Your Highness, we've already properly greeted them, but they couldn't confess anything. It seems they really don't know anything. However, we did find a strange person in the prison. Ha! Mo Lien stopped in her tracks. Weirdo. Duan Yu also couldn't resist asking curiously, what, did you discover that there were still survivors in the prison when you garrisoned it? Yes. Hui Feng nodded vigorously. We also find it very strange that this is actually a living person. Mo Lien and Duan Yu were taken aback, but their interest was immediately piqued. Let's go take a look. Hui Feng led the 2 of them past a cage made of wooden fences and into the innermost part of the dungeon. Separated by the thick and solid fences, they gazed at the black shadow lying in the corner. Duan Yu walked up and knocked on the fence several times. Hey! The black shadow didn't react at all. It just lay there motionless. Someone went in. Tong went in just now. The 2 of them turned to look at Tong, who was following behind them like a shadow. The latter stepped forward and reported, this subordinate discovered that this person is somewhat mystical. The tendons in his arms and legs were clearly snapped, and he was so hungry that he was only skin and bones, but he was indeed alive. Let's go in and take a look, Duan Yu said. Hui Feng opened the prison door, and the group quickly walked inside. Chapter 28:17. He's not pretending, right? Duan Yu walked up with a grin. He looked unconcerned, but he was actually on full alert. He casually took a rod from Hui Feng and slowly flipped over the shadow in the corner. That person flipped over and faced the sky. His empty eyes exuded a hint of lifelessness as he stared fixedly at them. Strictly speaking, he really couldn't be considered looking at them because he was clearly blind. Who are you? The Crown Prince asked. Your Highness, he's a mute. Sir Su has already examined him. Tong whispered, not only are the meridians in his limbs severed, but he's also deaf, mute, and blind. Mo Lien involuntarily creased her brows. This was too inconceivable. You're certain he lived here alone for several decades? Tong nodded. According to the traces here, that is indeed the case. So this person was deaf, blind, and mute, and had been paralyzed here for several decades. How did he survive? Duan Yu was perplexed. He relied on medicinal liquid to survive. A voice came from outside the bars. A middle-aged man entered with him. He wore a cyan robe and looked very proper. Sir Su, what do you mean? Su Shuatao smiled faintly. Everyone, please follow me. Everyone followed Sir Su outside the prison cell. Sir Su pointed at the stone trough at the top of the cave and sighed. Many pills are stored there, and there's a very elaborate mechanism outside. According to my calculations, every 24 hours, a pill will be sent down from the stone trough. Oh. Realization dawned on Hui Feng. That funnel below is for receiving pills. That's right. A hint of admiration involuntarily appeared in Sir Su's eyes. This should be the handiwork of an extremely outstanding mechanism master. There's also a container for draining rainwater on the side. Once the two are combined, it becomes a nutritious medicinal liquid. And that guy has been lying in that place all this time because he was imprisoned there. He can only helplessly wait for the medicinal liquid to fall from the sky every day. This medicinal liquid is truly good. Sir Su said, it doesn't need to be taken orally. It can be absorbed by the body through any inch of skin. Even if you can only maintain a half-dead state, it's impossible for you to have the strength to kill yourself. What a speechless life. He didn't know which damned master had come up with such a torturous punishment. Who knew what kind of thing that unlucky fellow had done to incur the wrath of the mechanical grandmaster engineer to seek revenge like this? He had stayed here for decades, neither dead nor alive. It was truly too tragic. Duan Yu and Mo Lien exchanged glances before suddenly asking with a chuckle, where's Jin Zhaoyang? Bring him here. Mo Lien was stunned for a moment, but she immediately understood. He nodded and said to Hui Feng, bring him over. Soon, Jin Zhaoyang was brought to this small prison cell. There wasn't a single piece of good flesh on this fellow's body, and his face was swollen like a pig's head. He looked at Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others in horror. The meaning in his eyes was as if he was looking at several demons. He probably never imagined that he would fall into such a miserable state in his life. If it was possible, he really wished he could turn back time. He wouldn't have accepted the mission of provoking and humiliating the little stoic even if he died. So regretful, so regretful. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in life. What are you doing? Chapter 28:18. It was only after Jin Zhaoyang opened his mouth that he realized his voice was trembling. Cowardly, too cowardly. He, a Grand Yellow Rank Great Talisman practitioner, actually fell to this state. It was truly a case of a tiger being bullied by dogs when it fell to the plains. I confessed everything. Jin Xiaoyang's voice trembled as he said, it was Holy Sun Mi Yen who hired me. He wanted to take Miss Chow down a notch. Do you see this person? Duan Yu interrupted Jin Xiaoyang with a grin, indicating for him to look at the pile of junk lying in the corner. The tendons in his arms and legs are all rotten, and he's all skin and bones, but he's not dead. Do you know why? Because the Crown Prince didn't want him to die so easily. Duan Yu blinked and said, you also want to become like this person. I wonder if you can survive 30 years in this dungeon. Jin Xiaoyang's vision darkened. He only felt that life was hopeless, and his future was terrifyingly dark. He crumpled to the ground like a puddle of mud. He scrambled to the front of the two and confessed with tears and snot streaming down his face, I really told you everything I know. I can swear that I'll tell you everything I know. Oh. Then what about the heavenly fate? A faint light flashed through Prince Mo's eyes. Jin Xiaoyang hastily wailed, I confess everything. You're talking about the faction behind Sir Holy Sun, right? Xiao Xiao really doesn't know. I am only a very peripheral member. If you didn't tell me today, I wouldn't even know that the organization behind Sir Holy Sun is called Tian Heavenly Fate. The two had been observing his expression while he was speaking, and they couldn't help but frown when they heard this. The two exchanged a look. Prince Mo, I used a dictum talisman on him. He can't lie in this state of mental breakdown, so he probably really doesn't know. Duan Yu, kill him. Deal with it, Crown Prince Mo said coldly. However, Jin Xiaoyang actually felt a sense of relief after hearing this. He would rather die than live for several decades like that pitiful person with crippled limbs. Your Highness, please wait. Teacher Su cupped his hands and said, I discovered an extremely strange constitution in this person's body. It seems to be some kind of medicine that has taken up residence in his body. His body is very strange. Mo Lian and Duan Yu looked at each other before turning to look at Mr. Su at the same time. They asked in unison, did you discover anything? For the time being, I can only extract some blood from this person's body for analysis and research. Mr. Su cupped his hands and said. Mo Lian explained to Duan Yu, Sir Su has a certain level of research on formations, pills, and talismans. Since he said so, it means that there is indeed something strange about Jin Xiaoyang's body. Thank you, sir. Duan Yu exchanged a look with Mo Lian before saying with a smile, if sir can find out what's strange about Jin Xiaoyang's body, it would be a great help to us. Mr. Su hurriedly said humbly, Your Highnesses are too polite. This is something that I should do. Mo Lian then turned to Sir Su and said, then I will hand this person over to Sir Su for you to study. If you make any progress in your research, please tell me everything you know. Certainly. Mr. Su quickly bowed in salute. Mo Lian said to the two youths behind her, Shi, Dark Shang, you two will follow sir and assist him in the future. All the materials needed for the research must be properly prepared. Yes. The two youths immediately cupped their fists in salute. Mr. Su was a bit overwhelmed by the favor and repeatedly returned the salute. Chapter 28:19. Mo Lian turned around and walked out of the prison. She pursed her thin lips when she saw Duan Yu's odd expression. What? Have the subordinates of the Night Pavilion never rebelled before? What kind of nonsensical names did His Highness the Crown Prince come up with? Humph. Prince Mo turned to leave haughtily. However, they heard Jin Xiaoyang's terrified screams. Let me out. What are you doing? Don't lock me up here. Don't. Where are you taking me? Just kill me. Just kill me. Shut up. Duan Yu turned around and coldly glanced at him. He sarcastically said, right now, we merely need you to cooperate and provide some blood. If you don't cooperate, do you want to become like him? After saying this, Duan Yu gestured with his eyes for him to look at the black shadow huddled in the corner. Jin Zhaoyang violently shuddered, and then he wilted. He repeatedly nodded in agreement. Don't make me like this. I'll provide. I'll definitely tell you everything I know and help you without reserve. Duan Yu swept him a glance before following him out of the prison. After exiting the dungeon, Hui Feng walked up to ask, Your Highness, how should we deal with the living dead in the dungeon? Deal with him, Mo Lian replied apathetically. It was also a very painful thing for that person to stay like this, neither dead nor alive. Speaking of which, he had helped him a lot. Okay. Hui Feng nodded and had one of his hidden guards go deal with the cripple in the dungeon. However, it wasn't long before the entire dungeon emitted a vibrating hum. The hidden guards guarding the door were confused and wanted to rush in to investigate, but they were instantly sent flying by a gust of air and crashed to the ground with a clatter. Mo Lian and Duan Yu's expressions changed at the same time, and they rushed into the dungeon again. At this time, the dungeon was littered with shattered bricks and stones. That inexplicable force had also blasted out a semicircular gap in the sturdiest wooden fence. Fortunately, Su Shuatao had 2 secret guards protecting him, so he didn't suffer any serious injuries. On the other hand, Jin Zhaoyang, who had been seriously injured before, was thrown out by this force and landed at the entrance of the dungeon. It was clear that he was on the verge of death. Su Shuatao hurriedly ordered people to carry Jin Zhaoyang out for treatment. Inside the dungeon, many secret guards stood by Prince Mo's side, looking at the blurry black shadow in the cage. Just now, it was this person who had emitted a very strong energy fluctuation that had caused half of the prison cell to collapse in an instant. What the hell was this person? Half of his body was already paralyzed and unable to move, so how could he still release such a powerful force? Duan Yu narrowed his eyes as he sized up that person. That weirdo, who had been huddling in the corner the entire time, had already sat up at this time, and his eerie eyes stared fixedly at him and Mo Lian. Mo Lian frowned. This person is very strange. Be careful. Your Highness, there's actually a cave here. Huifeng's voice attracted everyone's attention. Mo Lian and Duan Yu walked over one after the other. Sure enough, they saw that a cave had been broken open in the prison cell. And foam poured in from the inside with a whoosh. At a glance, it seemed like there was no end in sight. Huifeng's figure swayed slightly before he was instantly pulled over by Mo Lian. There seemed to be a very strong suction force underground. If a person stood at the entrance of the cave, they really would be pulled in if they weren't careful. Chapter 28-20. Your Highness, how about I go down and take a look? Hui Feng nimbly tied a rope around his waist. How can you go down with this rope? Duan Yu glanced at him and pursed his lips. The gales below are like knives. Although you've used a protective shield, the rope is exposed, so it'll definitely be cut the moment you go down. Mo Lian looked at him. You have a solution. Duan Yu's hand swept out, and a metal rope landed in his hand. I'll go down and take a look. Hui Feng hastily stopped him and said, Let me go. Duan Yu waved his hand and tied that strange metal rope around his waist before handing the other end to Mo Lian. Then, he jumped into that pitch-black hole without another word. Mo Lian felt her hand tighten slightly, and she forcefully pulled on the rope in her hand. That metal rope immediately extended endlessly into the depths of the hole. Hui Feng couldn't help but be speechless. Heavens, just how deep is this hole? Prince Chen had already gone down for more than 5 minutes, but this rope was still extending endlessly. After several more minutes passed, Mo Lien took a step backwards. He raised and flung his left hand, pulling hard on the metal rope with a backhand. That strange rope was stretched straight and taut, falling vertically into the dark hole, stretched until it was straight. Hui Feng hastily wanted to go up and help, but he only took a step back when he saw Prince Mo shaking his head at him. Ahem. A muffled cough sounded especially clear in the silence of the surroundings. Everyone reflexively turned their heads and shockingly discovered that the filthy figure that had originally curled up into a ball was actually slowly standing up. Weren't the meridians in his limbs severed? Hui Feng blurted out. All the hidden guards instantly felt their hair stand on end, and they surged forward to firmly protect His Highness the Crown Prince in the middle as they focused on dealing with that strange person. Cough, cough, cough. The strange person let out very strange coughs, as if he hadn't spoken for several decades. As soon as he opened his mouth, it was as if a wheel had run over him, and even his vocal cords were a bit torn. Everyone was on high alert, waiting for the strange man to make his move. However, after waiting for a long time, there was still no movement from the other party. That pair of serene eyes seemed to be a little focused, and his gaze fell on them indifferently. Hui Feng was considered experienced and knowledgeable, but he couldn't help but feel a bit horrified at this moment. Who had ever seen a blind and mute guy whose limbs and veins were all broken slowly recover in less than an hour? Was he a freak? Your Highness. Hui Feng felt that he needed to quickly take His Highness the Crown Prince away from this place. This strange person seemed to have too many variables. Mo Lien gave him a look, telling him to calm down. At this moment, he was holding onto the metal rope, so naturally, he couldn't escape. Fortunately, Duan Yu's movements were quick, and it didn't take long for him to be hauled up by Mo Lien along the rope. There was still something wrapped in a piece of cloth on his shoulder. As soon as he jumped to the ground, he hurriedly threw the thing on his shoulder to the ground and jumped to the side with a dark face. It stinks. It was really stinky. Mo Lien also caught a whiff of this odor, and she couldn't help but frown as she took a step back. That cloth unraveled, revealing a person with disheveled hair and dirt all over his body. As if he had been buried in the ground for several decades. He was filthy and smelly. Probably even the beggars on the streets were a bit better than him. By now, Duan Yu had already seen the strange person's appearance in the corner. What happened to him? He stood up. Chapter 28-21. Ha ha ha. At this time, the person in the shroud suddenly let out an unpleasant, owl-like laugh. Old geezer, you're not dead, ah ha 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 ha. Cough, cough, cough. At this time, the weirdo in the corner slowly straightened his body, revealing a pitch-black face. Duan Yu's figure flashed to Mo Lien's side. The two looked at each other and saw a hint of confusion in each other's eyes. Judging from their conversation, it seemed like they were old acquaintances. Looks like you've lost. Ha ha ha. The person in the shroud abruptly tossed aside the cloth on his body, his eyes overflowing with a shrewd light. Cough, cough. At this time, the person in the corner had also slowly walked forward. His gaze also contained some confusion as it landed on Mo Lien's group. Who are you? Duan Yu glanced at Mo Lien and lowered his voice to ask, this person can't be Beiwang Valley's previous owner, right? So, the owner actually didn't die at all, and you brought people to openly enter it like this? This was truly a blunder. Mo Lien was also a bit dumbfounded at this time, and she turned to look at Hui Feng, who was standing next to her. Hui Feng explained woodenly, when this subordinate found this place, the valley entrance was crawling with poisonous insects and snakes. After having people clean it up, they went inside to take a look. This place had clearly been vacant for several decades. Duan Yu couldn't help but laugh out loud. So this group of idiots thought that this place was ownerless. Who would have expected that the previous owner would be imprisoned in the dungeon for some reason and come back to life now? Huifeng's mouth twitched, and he cupped his hands in greeting. May I ask who Senior is? This old man is Qin Qi. That weirdo looked around, and when his gaze landed on Mo Lian and Duan Yu, it clearly paused for a split second, and a faint hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. These two juniors looked to be in their early 20s, but their cultivation was rather shocking. Old Senior, why are you in this dungeon? Huifeng asked exasperatedly, are you the Valley Master of Beiwang Valley? Qin Qi shook his head. No. Many years ago, this old man and that old ghost chased an enemy to this Beiwang Valley. After killing the enemy, we will also kill everyone in this valley. Not even a chicken or dog will be spared. Then why did Senior become like that? Since he had already eliminated his enemy, why did he still end up in such a ghastly state and locked up in the dungeon? Huifeng simply couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he racked his brains. Ha 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 ha. It was me who did it. The other person laughed complacently. Old Ghost Qin, are you still not going to admit defeat? Qin Qi glanced at him indifferently. How did I lose? This group of juniors just happened to barge in by accident, and the gambling had long been spoiled by them. To be fair, we should have a rematch. Seniors, may I ask what your wager is? Duan Yu inquired curiously. Brat, I can see that you have a good bone structure and excellent talent. You are a good material for cultivation. Do you want to take this old man as your master? Hee, thank you. My name is Lu Zhang. Have you heard of my name? This old man is an outstanding mechanism master who is renowned throughout the 3 provinces. Brat, I can see that your hands are suitable for fiddling with elaborate mechanisms, so you might as well take this old man as your master. Bah, shameless thing, you want to kidnap a disciple again. Qin Qi scolded him before turning to look at Mo Lian with a grin. Brat, you are an artificer, right? Chapter 28-22. A chrysanthemum-like smile instantly blossomed on his aged face. Child, how about I impart all my life's knowledge to you? This way, I can die without any regrets. Bah! Don't think of dying in front of me. Scram! Scram, scram, scram. You're the one scram. You're not allowed to die in front of me. Then let's continue gambling. Wait, seniors. Seniors, fuck, these two people added together were probably 1,000 years old, right? Why were they still acting like old urchins, biting each other whenever they met? Duan Yu helplessly separated the two of them, but the next second, he couldn't resist taking a step back from the stench. Mo Lian couldn't resist twitching her mouth, and she silently inched back half a step. It wasn't that he was disdainful of these two seniors, but they were truly too smelly. Compared to that strange fish they encountered in north-facing Great Forest that day fine, there wasn't much of a difference between the two. Seniors, according to what you said earlier, you chased your enemy here. After killing your enemy, why would you? Duan Yu pointed at their unbearably filthy and smelly bodies. Moreover, Senior Qin Qi's meridians were clearly severed earlier, so why would they be now? Kid, you're very curious. Qin Qi chuckled as he approached Mo Lian. The latter retreated several steps back and shook his head. This junior isn't curious. Duan Yu, let's go. After all this commotion, it was almost daybreak. He had to hurry back. His wifey was still waiting for him at home. He didn't want to mess around here with these smelly old men. Duan Yu immediately followed after. He also felt that rather than being targeted by these two eccentric geezers, it would be better to leave with Mo Lien as soon as possible. Senior Chen, since this place isn't Senior's residence, then it belongs to this junior. Mo Lien waved her hand at Hui Feng and the others. Find some people to throw away all the junk inside and renovate it. Stay here for a while. Yes. Hui Feng nodded, and then he silently glanced at the Crown Prince. His Highness the Crown Prince seized this residence in north-facing valley in front of these two eccentric old men. Wasn't this a bit too careless? After all, these two seniors had unfathomable cultivation bases. However, the two old men were also very strange. When they heard the Crown Prince say this, they did not refute or get angry. It was as if they really did not have the slightest interest in this residence. Punk, have you thought it through? Qin Chi and Lu Jing chased after Mo Lien and Duan Yu at the same time and asked. What do you think? The two of them looked at each other and hurriedly rushed out of the door, unwilling to stay with these two strange old men for even a minute longer. What kind of joke was this? Out of the blue, they were talking about acknowledging him as their master. These two old and indecent fellows. How could these two old men, who had popped out of nowhere, casually accept a disciple? They weren't familiar with each other, so why should they acknowledge him as their master the moment they met? I won't admit it, I won't admit it. The two of them were extremely fast, one black and one white, like lightning, leaving the North Valley in an instant. Not long after they left the valley, Mo Lien summoned Little Seven, and Duan Yu quickly jumped up as well. Little Seven transformed into a golden dragon and soared into the sky, bringing the two of them back to the royal school. At this time, the sky was already starting to brighten. The two of them had just stepped through Donglin Court's entrance when they heard a crisp voice resounding in dissatisfaction. Great! Sneaking out to play in the middle of the night without a JoJo. The two of them felt a chill at the back of their heads, and they turned around to look. Chapter 28-23. Under the faint morning light, Lady Jojo was wearing a pinkish-pink dress and a large red cloak. She looked like a small jade doll with a taut stoic face as she sat on a stone stool at the side of the garden, glaring at the two of them with her round eyes. The little fellow's hair was tied up into a simple and neat ponytail, and a small golden butterfly was faintly fluttering in her hair. Her cheeks were pink and tender, and her skin was as smooth as jade. It truly made one's heart flutter. Did Lady Jojo just happen to catch them red-handed? The two of them were dazed for a moment before walking over to her. Wifey, why are you up? Morning, Jojo. The two of them were in high spirits and looked magnanimous. Xiao Xiao's little eyes, however, could not help but sweep back and forth between the two of them. She glanced at one and then looked at the other. With a stern face, she asked in a loud voice, "Where did the two of you go in the middle of the night?" Mo Lien suddenly felt like laughing. However, it was better not to laugh now, lest his wifey explode. Arbor looked at the two of them suspiciously no matter how he looked at them. Didn't they say that men were a strange species? They could wear open-crotch pants and visit brothels together. Revolutionary friendships all started from visiting brothels. What are you thinking about? Mo Lien's eyes twitched inwardly. She was about to pat the little fellow's head when she suddenly recalled that she seemed to have come into contact with a stinky old ghost earlier, so she quickly retracted her hand. When Lady Jojo saw this, she felt that this man was even more suspicious. If he didn't do anything wrong, why didn't he dare to touch Jojo? The little fellow bounced up and pattered to the two of them. She looked up and asked solemnly, "Speak. Where did you go?" Cough. Duan Yu blinked and said innocently, "Jojo, I was woken up by Mo Lien. When I came out, I saw this guy sneaking out the door." Mo Lien turned around and fiercely glared at him. Brotherly love dies at the sight of the light, so it was indeed her husband who had sneaked out in the middle of the night. Jojo turned his head and said, "Tell me the truth." "I built a small base in the great forest of the north and arranged for many people to be stationed there. I went there overnight to take a look." Mo Lien smoothly narrated, who knew that I would encounter two stinky old geezers in the small base's dungeon. This stinky old geezer insisted that hubby acknowledge him as his master. After a round of torment, hubby could only rush back when the sun had already risen. Mr. Jojo quickly took a step back and looked at the two men with disdain. "Oh. No wonder the two of you smell so weird. So it's because of the old man. It stinks, it stinks." The two princes who were despised expressed that they were really innocent. Before they could continue their conversation, a loud voice shouted from behind them, "Who's smelly? Little miss, come here and explain to this old man." Mo Lien was slightly startled, and she quickly turned around to look. She saw the two old men, Chen Qi and Lu Jing, standing at the entrance of the garden's small arched door and looking at them with bright eyes. "Why did you follow us?" Duan Yu was also greatly astonished, even shocked. Little Seven Speed actually couldn't shake off these two old men. Who exactly were they? With his and Mo Lien's cultivation, they actually didn't sense the two old men following them the entire way. Chapter 28-24. The two people's expressions both changed, and they hastily blocked in front of Qiao Mu with a flash. "Punk, quickly move aside. This old man wants to have a good talk with the little miss." Before he could finish speaking, a light flashed from the little girl's body, and two pitch-black wooden tokens suddenly flew out and hung in midair, flickering with a lustrous black light. Mo Lien was shocked, thinking that his wifey had preemptively used talismans. But when he focused his eyes, these weren't ebony talismans, but two wooden tokens with very simple and clear lines. Each wooden token was engraved with a person's name. What were these? Duan Yu and Mo Lien both turned to look at the little fellow. Qiao Qiao, on the other hand, had a baffled look on her face. She stretched out her hand and pushed the two of them. Then, she walked forward with small steps between the two of them. "What are you two doing? Casually barging into someone else's house?" Little miss, who are you?" Chen Qi reached out to grab that token in midair, his eyes shining as he looked at the child. "What's your relationship with the Xuanji school?" The other elderly man, Lu Jing, also looked at Arbor in excitement. Xuanji school. A thought flashed through Arbor's mind, and he sized up these two elderly men. Could these two tokens in midair be these two old men's tokens? "You know Senior Xuanji." Back then in the Xuanji mystic realm, the little fellow was forced to accept this title of second-generation sect master and received several messy missions. After that, she threw this second-generation sect master title to the back of her mind. In any case, she was the only naked person in the entire Xuanji school, so this second-generation sect master title naturally existed only in name. But she didn't expect that she would unexpectedly encounter two Xuanji school disciples here today. According to Xuanji's words, these disciples with name tags were all one of the 103 first-generation disciples. Didn't this Xuanji tell her to gather all the first-generation disciples? In truth, she had long forgotten about this matter. Who the hell knew where to find those first-generation disciples? But now, it seemed that the world was this wonderful. While you were completely unprepared, a Xuanji sect disciple jumped out. "You are junior sister Xuanji's descendant?" Chen Qi asked in a trembling voice. You've seen Xuanji before, haven't you? Where have you seen her?" Yes, Xuanji. How is Xuanji now?" Lu Jing couldn't help but ask agitatedly. She. How is she?" Arbor was silent for a moment and then said, "What I saw was only her afterimage. In the Xuanji mystic realm. She didn't know if she should tell these two that she had obtained the Xuanji core. She was afraid that these two people were crazy or had ulterior motives. It was her first time meeting these two old men, so she naturally couldn't trust them completely. You have our name tag in your hand," Qin Chi said excitedly. "You must be the second-generation head of our Xuanji school." The veins on Arbor's forehead throbbed slightly. Qin Chi ignored him and was still very excited. He hurriedly went forward and bowed. "Second sect leader, I am Qin Chi, the first-generation elder Qin Chi. I am Xuanji's senior brother." "Second sect leader, I am also Xuanji's senior brother." Lu Jing hurriedly went forward and said, "Second sect leader, you don't have to hold back. The two of us are absolutely sincere to Xuanji school. You can trust us completely." Yes, second sect leader, tell us more about Xuanji's situation." Chapter 28-25. Arbor gazed at these two people. To be more precise, she had not been able to clearly see the faces of these two people until now. There was a thick layer of filth on their heads, faces, and the back of their hands, as if they were fished out from the 18th level of a smelly ditch. They were so smelly that Miss Chiao wanted to roll her eyes. "You guys are too smelly," Arbor bluntly said as she glanced at Mo Lian and Duan Yu. "You two also made them stink." The two elders and two youths that Miss Chiao called smelly people silently looked at each other. Duan Yu pulled up his sleeve and sniffed. "Am I really very smelly? It's suffocating." Xiao Mu exclaimed expressionlessly. "Clean yourselves first before talking to me." Mo Lian and Duan Yu were slightly better, and they came out after a few minutes. Standing obediently in front of the stoic Miss Chiao, Mo Lian voluntarily admitted her mistake. "I shouldn't have slept until the middle of the night and groped my way out by myself." Duan Yu nodded repeatedly. "You should have brought Jojo with you when going out on a mission." Miss Chiao harumphed. To think that she had put on a fiery red battle suit so early in the morning, deciding to have a good fight with them. She didn't expect these two to be so sensible. This was like punching soft cotton. These two people didn't want to fight with her, so what could she do by herself? She could only give up. As for those two old smelly people, they truly had decades of grease on their bodies, so they washed for a full 2 hours before coming out to meet people. By the time the two of them came out, Arbor and Qi Xuanxuan's group had already eaten breakfast. The little fatty looked back with a bowl of porridge in his hand and couldn't help but point at the two people strangely. "Hey, who are these two people?" When he pointed, the others also turned their heads to look at him. They saw two sanctimonious middle-aged men slowly walking over. Although they seemed to be moving very slowly, they arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye. Both of them were dressed in green robes, which made them look like immortals. He must have been a handsome man when he was young. These two reclusive seniors met by chance last night and were picked up by Mo Lian and Duan Yu, Arbor explained aloofly. Picked up. As expected of Prince Mo and Prince Chen, they were able to pick up two seniors just by going out for a walk. Duan Yu and Mo Lian couldn't help but fall silent when they met little fatty's group's adoring gazes. "Second sect leader, this breakfast looks pretty good." "Second sect leader, add 2 more pairs of chopsticks." "Second sect master, after we finish eating, can you tell us more about junior sister Xuanji?" Little fatty was dumbfounded. He turned to look at the expressionless Arbor. "Why do I feel like these two seniors are calling Jojo sect leader? It's the second sect master." Lu Yu held back her laughter and added, "Yes." Arbor stared at the two people with a cold expression for a moment before squeezing out, "Add 2 more sets of chopsticks." A servant immediately walked up and placed 2 clean sets of chopsticks on the table. Second sect leader, it's truly great to be able to see you. Chen-Chi ate 2 mouthfuls and couldn't stop wiping his tears with his sleeve. Seeing you is like seeing our junior sister Xuanji. That's right. Taking a closer look, you really do resemble our junior sister Xuanji. Both of you are equally cold and cheerless, with picturesque features. Emichim, noble temperament. Chapter 28-26. Qi Xuanchuan's eyebrows twitched. Why did she feel like these 2 seniors were a bit fawning? The little stoic looked at them expressionlessly. Desolate. How was that senior Xuanji calm? Recalling senior Xuanji's afterimage she saw in the mystic realm, the little stoic couldn't associate her with the word desolate. The little stoic felt that it was more appropriate to call her an amusing idiot or a chatterbox. If even her afterimage could talk so much, it was obvious how chatterbox her original self was at this time. Mo Lian and Duan Yu could tell from their conversation. It turned out that these 2 people were actually elders of the Xuanji school, and they both wanted to worship Jojo as the schoolmaster. Thankfully, they didn't agree to become that nuisance's disciple. Otherwise, wouldn't they be a generation lower than their Sir Jojo for no reason? Inappropriate, extremely inappropriate. Cough, speaking of which, when did Jojo take over as the Xuanji school's schoolmaster? Second schoolmaster, Chen-Chi said solemnly. On the other side, Lu Jing also nodded and cupped his hands towards the sky. He wiped his tears and said, the schoolmaster can only be our junior sister Xuanji. Everyone ridiculed this oddball school in their minds one after another. They always felt that the little stoic had her own oddball halo. No matter what serious matter it was, it would always run wildly toward a strange fork in the road in her hands. For example, taking over a school was a very serious matter, but when it came to the little stoic, it went in the direction of a joke. Laugh if you want to, no need to hold it in, the little stoic said coldly with a wooden face. From the corner of her eye, she could see the smile on Qi Xuanchuan's face. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Our dear Qi Xianxian hastily pressed down the corners of her mouth and said with a serious expression, How is it funny? Little fatty, what are you laughing at? The little fatty's smile froze. When he saw the little stoic looking at him from the corner of her eye, he quickly put on a serious expression. Jojo, cough, when did you take over as the schoolmaster? Why didn't we know? It's been a long time. The little stoic snapped. Before I met you guys. Second sect master, where did you discover junior sister Xuanji's mystic realm? Is it that time when the 3 sects, 5 factions, and 8 great patrician families gathered from the north, south, east, west, and east to train in the mystic beast forest? Duan Yu chuckled. Emichim, Qiao Mu expressionlessly responded with a word. She once again recalled her disastrous encounter during her experiential training in the mystic beast forest. At that time, she had even been plotted against by the disaster-courting talisman and cut a sorry figure. This was a past that she really didn't want to talk about. Duan Yu's mouth twitched. He remembered that after the little fellow had disappeared from the mystic beast forest, everyone had searched for her with great fanfare. In the end, when she appeared in the Mo Kingdom capital, the little one seemed to be completely unaware, only knowing how to cultivate. For a while, he didn't even recognize them. Lower Star Field. Chen-Chi asked cautiously. Emichim, the little stoic put on a serious expression and silently put down her chopsticks. Chen-Chi started sobbing again. Junior sister, you're too pitiful. You were actually forced to flee to the lower star region. Sob. It's all that old bastard's fault. Right, that's right, it's him. If it weren't for that guy quarreling with our junior sister, how could our junior sister have run out of the abode and ended up falling into someone's trap? It's that old bastard who deserves to die. He married our junior sister but didn't treat her well. The two old men sobbed loudly when they talked about their sore spots. Chapter 28-27. Arbor silently glanced at the two old men. It seemed that there was a heart-wrenching, sorrowful love story between them and Senior Xuanji. Everyone imagined a touching melodramatic four-sided love story. At the same time, they looked at the two old men with gossipy eyes. As the king of gossip, the little fatty couldn't help but ask, "Seniors, can you tell us about you and Senior Xuanji?" Sob, sob, sob. Qin Chi said while crying, "Junior Xuanji and I grew up together on Rosy Cloud's Peak since we were 10 years old." "Me too." Lu Jing interrupted in annoyance. Junior Xuanji was smart and lively since she was young. She was born beautiful. Qin Chi wiped his tears. It's hard not to like her. Both of you liked Senior Xuanji at the same time. The little fatty's eyes flashed with the fire of gossip. Who would have thought that after you grew up, an old bastard senior would appear? He was so talented and unrestrained that he attracted Senior Xuanji and abducted her. How did you know? Qin Chi looked surprised. The little fatty pursed his lips. Seniors, you're underestimating my intelligence. Is it so hard to guess? From the few words that the two of them had exchanged before, it was easy to deduce what they were thinking. That's right. That old bastard abducted our junior Xuanji. Qin Chi thought of the sad part and couldn't help but call out, "Give us a pot of wine." Arbor silently took out a wine pot carved with plum blossoms and placed it in front of the two. In the end, everyone quickly took out wine cups from their inner worlds and rushed forward to share the wine. After 1 cup per person, the wine pot was empty. Qin Chi and Lu Jing took a sip of the wine and sighed deeply. Then their eyes lit up. This wine is not bad. It's mellow and has a hint of the cold fragrance of plum blossoms. When I take a sip, I feel as if there are wisps of saint power flowing slowly in my body. The two of them took another sip, and Lu Jing started sobbing again. What have we been doing for the past few decades? When Lu Jing cried, Qin Chi cried as well. The two old men who were hundreds of years old cried miserably in front of a group of juniors. Arbor looked at Qi Xianxian speechlessly. Qi Xianxian hurriedly took out 2 pieces of leftover fabric from her pocket. He handed it to the two seniors and said sympathetically, "Seniors, please don't cry. Wipe your tears." Qin Chi and Lu Jing took the piece of cloth and wiped their tears and snot as they said pitifully, "After so many years, I've finally heard some news about junior sister Xuanji. I'm both happy and upset. Second sect leader, you don't have to hide it from us. Actually, we already knew that junior sister Xuanji was dead 100 years ago. Her life tablet has been broken long ago, and her life lamp has been scattered. The afterimage you saw in the Xuanji mystic realm should be the last remnant consciousness she left behind in this world." The two of them heaved a long sigh, raised their wine glasses, and took a sip. "We've been together with junior martial sister day and night, cultivating together for hundreds of years. However, it was precisely because of that time when junior sister went down the mountain to gain experience and got acquainted with that old bastard that everything changed. I really don't know what's so good about that bastard. He looks so dignified, but he's actually a cold-hearted stinky man." That's right. Junior martial sister's love was really misplaced, and her sincerity went down the drain. Who exactly is this old bastard you're talking about? Chapter 28-28. Arbor expressionlessly asked the two of them. "Second sect master, you don't need to concern yourself with this matter." Qin Chi gnashed his teeth. This is a grudge between us two brothers. As long as this old bastard dares to show himself, us two brothers will definitely grind his bones to dust. Xiao Mu replied with an "oh," and the atmosphere suddenly chilled. Qin Chi opened his mouth, but he suddenly didn't know what to say. Shouldn't the second sect master say something like, "Sect master's business is my business, sect master's grudge is my grudge, and I want to avenge you together," or something impassioned like that? Why was he suddenly so mute? When Mo Lian and Duan Yu saw the two old men's deflated expressions, they couldn't resist bursting out in laughter. These two people really didn't understand Jojo at all. Lady Jojo was actually an honest person. Since someone else said she didn't need to care, then she would definitely wash her hands and not care. Seniors, looking at how you were in Beiwang Valley, could it be that, you're courting your own deaths? Qin Chi gazed deeply at Mo Lian before sighing. Ever since junior sister left with that old bastard more than 200 years ago, the two of us felt that there was nothing left to live for, so we simply entered closed-door cultivation. It wasn't until 100 years ago that we forcefully exited closed-door cultivation when we received news of junior sister's death. We searched for our enemies along the way to avenge junior sister. When the last enemy was also eliminated by us, we felt that life was hopeless and lacked a lot of fun. Thus, the two of us made a bet. Whoever died first had to be buried in junior sister's cenotaph. Qin Chi sighed in despair. I shattered the meridians in my 4 limbs and sealed off my 5 senses. I originally thought that I would definitely die. He glared fiercely at Lu Zheng. Who knew that this son of a bitch would actually set up a mechanism to extend my life by 30 years? So senior, you jumped into that bottomless pit yourself. Duan Yu twitched his mouth as he looked at Lu Zheng with certainty. Exactly. Lu Zheng's old face was taut as he said angrily, if it weren't for you being so fussy and meddling in other people's business, I would have starved to death in a year or so. Boring. Arbor finished the appraisal and coldly glanced at the two of them. Qin Chi suddenly burst into tears, pounding his chest and stamping his feet. It's boring, it's boring. This old man also feels extremely bored. For the past 100 years, he didn't even know how he had survived. Woo woo woo, Xiao Mu glanced at the bawling old man, and her gaze softened. She said faintly, she passed away very peacefully. Her broken shadow had set up a trap in the secret realm. More than 20 generations of people have been cheated. With that, she briefly recounted how Xuanji had set up the mystic realm, tricked batches of people into entering it, and finally handed over the past generations of resources to her, the second sect master. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard this. When Xuanji's 2 senior brothers heard this, they even smiled and nodded repeatedly. That's what our junior sister would do. She played with more than 20 generations of people. The mystic realm opened once every 10 years, and she had a lot of fun. Arbor said expressionlessly, presumably, she was an open-minded person by nature. By the time she reached the final step, there was no longer a trace of resentment in her heart. What was left was probably just a trace of reluctance to leave this world. That was why this bored fellow would set up a mystic realm and find more than 20 generations of juniors to play with her. Chapter 28-29. You've punished yourselves for several decades, and you've repaid your debts. From today onwards, behave properly and work yourself to the bone for the Xuanji school, Sir Jojo, Arbor said with a frosty expression. Qin Chi and Lu Zheng were taken aback and stared dumbfoundedly at Arbor. This little girl looked at her ice-cold little stoic face, but her thoughts were more meticulous than anyone else's. He was actually able to capture their true intentions from their words and phrases. Death was a simple matter for powerful beings like them. All they had to do was self-destruct. These two fools actually blamed themselves too much for Xuanji's death, so they hurt themselves out of grief. They were just punishing each other. If Xuanji was alive, with her personality, she would most likely beat them to a pulp. You're first-generation disciples of the Xuanji school, so you should know that the Xuanji school has 103 first-generation disciples, right? The two nodded. Senior Xuanji has entrusted you with an important mission. The little stoic said without blushing or panting. Senior Xuanji's intention is for you to find all the remaining first-generation disciples and bring them back. She took out a large pile of black nameplates from her inner world and handed them to Qin Qi and Lu Jing. As long as these nameplates are within a radius of 1,000 feet, they can sense the disciples' auras. Keep them well. The little stoic pushed the pile of nameplates in front of Qin Qi and Lu Jing. Qin Qi hastily asked, Junior Sister Xuanji wants to summon everyone back. Emisham, Arbor replied dryly. On the side, Lu Jing glanced at the little stoic in confusion. Second-generation schoolmaster, is this a mission the schoolmaster entrusted to you? He hit the nail on the head. The little stoic just wanted to be a hands-off boss right now. Her small face tensed up. This schoolmaster is handing this mission to you right now. Do you have any objections? No objections. Qin Qi and Lu Jing were a bit speechless. Mo Lian and the others, who were watching the show and enjoying the show, were secretly stifling their laughter. From today onwards, your main mission is to find the remaining 101 first-generation disciples. Qin Qi cupped his hands in salute. Don't worry, second-generation schoolmaster, the two of us won't seek death again. This little stoic looked cold and cheerless, but everything she did actually contained good intentions. She had given them such a tedious task so that they would be busy and not have time to think about other things. Arbor glanced at them and then looked away. Let's go. Mo Lian stood up as well. They still had to rush to the practice field to watch the competition. Today was the first day of Holy Sun Miyan selection in the royal school. The competition should be very lively. Second sect master. Lu Jing hurriedly called out to her. Before Xuanji left with that old bastard, she disbanded the Xuanji sect. After all these years, our Rosy Cloud's Peak should still be there. Yes, Red Cloud's Peak is full of spiritual power all year round. It's a very suitable place for cultivation. We want to go back and prepare for the re-establishment of our sect. There needs to be a ceremony. Xiao Mu's footsteps abruptly halted, and she turned around to look at them, her eyes flickering. How big? What? How big is Red Cloud's Peak? The Red Cloud Peak stretches far and wide, and beside it is the Carefree Peak. It's quite big. It's also not far from the Great Forest. Yes, one day is enough for a round trip. The little stoic's eyes lit up. Let's go together. Second-generation schoolmaster, you want to go back with us? Okay, that's really great. Xiao Mu nodded her small head repeatedly. She felt that the Holy Water sect was probably settled. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.